Taxation without representation. Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster, and thanks for joining us on the conversation. Washington, D.C., the residents there, they have a larger population than two states. There are more, the average person in D.C. pays more federal taxes than all states. The total number of tax dollars altogether, more than 22 states, and D.C. has a gross domestic product bigger than 16 states. But what Washington, D.C. does not have is voting representation in Congress. In other words, they have no say in Congress on Supreme Court justices, taxes, spending, issues of war and peace. But there is an effort to try and change that. Joining us now is Beau Schuff. He is executive director of DC Vote. Beau, the House passed the DC statehood bill. The Senate is taking it up and has scheduled a hearing. How significant is that?
It's massively significant. It's the second time in history that the House has passed this bill, the first time being all of a year ago. And for the Senate to take this bill up while it's passed one chamber is also historic. We've had hearings a couple of years ago, 7 years ago to be exact, but it was not while the bill was in play. So we're at a really serious stage and a very, very historic one.
A lot of people may be confused. Why is it that DC is not a state, or at least doesn't have that voting representation in Congress?
Sure, the Constitution requires a federal district that is home to the capital, so that it belongs to all Americans, and we agree with that. The DC statehood bill would preserve that federal capital and a federal district. That federal district is always going to be under control of Congress and always going to be available to the American people. But the land where our schools and our neighborhoods and our families and our grocery stores are would become the 51st state, Douglas Commonwealth, that would allow the 700,000 of us that call DC home to have full and equal representation.
So in other words, there's a federal enclave perhaps between the Capitol, the monuments, the White House, the Lincoln Memorial, and then the residential areas outside would be essentially the state. But there is this argument that some Republicans have made that, well, wait a second, we've already given electoral votes to people within this federal enclave. How can we change this without having to change the Constitution?
Well, sure, and there's a number of ways to deal with. The first one to keep in mind is that the 23rd Amendment has two parts to it. One that creates the electors, and the second part that allows Congress to figure out how to deal with those electors. And so Congress can do with it what they want to make sure that those electors either follow the will of the people and are awarded based on popular vote is one idea. Congress can also simply decide not to seat them or not to allow them to vote, because there has to be some mechanism. This was upheld in Bush v. Gore for electors to be chosen, ratified by a legislature, and then seated and cast their votes. And until Congress takes a preemptive action, that wouldn't happen. Additionally, we've seen challenging amendments, specifically the 18th, prohibition, repealed very quickly. The 21st Amendment that repealed prohibition happened in less than a year. And the 23rd doesn't come into play for another 3 years. There's plenty of time for it to be dealt with.
Washington, D.C., or at least the residents of D.C., they're the only ones in any democracy around the world that are not represented in essentially the federal government. That's the unique distinction in the United States. Washington, D.C. is comprised of about half of the residents are African Americans, 70% of all the residents are Democrats. Is that the toxic brew here, racism and politics?
Absolutely, Jerry Connolly, representative of Virginia, said it exactly that way. When they tell you it's not about race or politics, it's absolutely about race or politics. Look, the District of Columbia freed the slaves before any other federal location. Emancipation Day here is a district holiday, and it was before any other jurisdiction done by federal action. And that means there was a huge influx of an African American population. And the District of Columbia has always been Chocolate City. It is an African American majority for most of its existence, and now plurality. It would be the only state with a plurality African American jurisdiction, and just one of four where the persons of color are a majority. It is absolutely part of the reason why representation is denied here.
I'd hate to be the skunk at the garden party, but it seems like to get anything done in Washington, D.C., you have to agree to perhaps break the filibuster, and that requires the agreement of Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin from West Virginia, Sinema from Arizona. Where do they stand on D.C. statehood?
Yeah, let me challenge your phrasing just a little bit. We get a lot of stuff done here in Washington, D.C. It's Congress that doesn't seem to be able to get stuff done.
Fair point.
But you're on. We do not have an opinion out of Senator Sinema. That education work is ongoing. We're working in Arizona to make sure residents are aware of the situation and they can talk to their elected officials. Recently, Senator Manchin has said that he would prefer to see a constitutional amendment deal with statehood, and we've presented arguments as to why that isn't necessary, isn't required, and isn't how we've always admitted states. 37 of them, in fact, all of them except the original 13, came in based on basic, simple legislation requiring a simple majority. And never once as a statehood admission been filibustered. So I think that we're going to do some more education and convince those 2 senators and the 2 others from the Democratic caucus that aren't on the bill yet that statehood is in line with American values.
But you would agree there's not 60 votes in the U.S. Senate for statehood right now, right?
Not yet.
Okay, now it's possible, I suppose, if you can get to 51, and the idea is you would carve out what's known as a filibuster exemption, the same thing that Republicans did in order to carve out a simple majority for Supreme Court justices. Is there anything necessarily wrong in your view with a filibuster exemption, carving it out just for granting statehood?
There isn't, especially because statehood is in a different part of the Constitution than is legislation. There is actually some precedent for the idea, maybe not precedent, but there's an argument to be made that statehood is a special thing. It's mentioned separately in the Constitution from passing bills or raising taxes. And so it should be treated in a different way. And like I said, 37 times there's never been a filibuster of a state, and it shouldn't be this time either.
One of the interesting arguments I've heard from a couple of Republicans, including Matt Gaetz, Republican from Florida, of all members of Congress, suggested that he's against statehood, but he would be in favor of rolling back federal taxes on DC residents. In other words, giving DC residents the same tax status as, say, the residents of Guam and Puerto Rico who also don't pay federal taxes. Would that be a solution?
The idea that Matt Gaetz is offering a serious solution to anything is a bit humorous on its front. But the fact of the matter is Washingtonians are proud to be Americans and we're proud to play our part. And we're fine passing and paying our taxes. We understand what that means. It means that we can, implement things like universal pre-K and other things that are important to Washingtonians. So we're fine paying our taxes and we'll continue to do so. We just feel like we fought a war over taxation without representation. We won, and it should apply to everybody.
How much of the conversation has changed both because of President Trump and that photo op he had over a year and a half ago where we went to a church across the street from the White House, used federal forces to essentially clear out peaceful protesters. And by the way, they did use tear gas. And then also because of January 6th, it wasn't as if DC could suddenly call up the National Guard. Only the president can call up the National Guard into DC.
Both of those instances were most definitely wake-up moments for some folks across the country. There's always been a key support level for statehood and for understanding what's going on. But absolutely, there were folks who didn't necessarily know what it meant to live in DC and what it meant to live without representation. And those moments were an opportunity for us to show them what that really felt like. And the fact that the president can take over our local cops without any notification.
Well, look, it's long been shocking to me, and I was a resident of DC for 17 years and fought like hell for DC statehood. So I'll be honest about this. I do think it's total racism and politics that DC is denied representation in Congress. There is this other idea that a couple of Republicans have floated through the years, and that is, okay, go ahead and grant a voting representation just in the House to DC, and then grant an extra vote to, say, a state like Utah.
Yeah.
Where does that go?
That idea it actually passed both chambers. It was in 2 separate Congresses, so it didn't become law. But it has passed and it had bipartisan support. The problem there is, even if you go so far as to give DC a vote in the House and 2 full votes in the Senate, you still have control of the district by Congress, and that's just not fair. We have absolutely no local autonomy. The Congress has the ability to overturn our local laws and our local spending. We're prevented all the time. We can't legalize marijuana, for example, even though residents voted massively in support of it and states across the country have implemented it. We have no ability to use Medicaid funds for low-income abortion services, even though other states can. They blocked domestic partner registries for 10 years. They blocked needle exchanges for 10 years. There's just myriad of examples of times that Congress has interfered with the decisions that DC residents have made about how to govern DC. And that is one of the most fundamental American values there is, that we are governed based on the consent of the governed.
And to people who are not aware of this, I mean, DC's budget is still essentially subject to the approval of Congress. So as you mentioned, 10 years ago, as I saw, when DC wanted to have a needle exchange program, well, the money for that was stripped out by Congress and said, no, DC can't do it, even though the residents of DC, the leadership of DC said, no, this will help us.
Yeah, and it goes to the ridiculous. 2 years ago, they told us we couldn't label wet wipes in a specific way because members of the House of Representatives objected to it. So we couldn't say that a wet wipe was flushable. So whether it's the ridiculous or the very serious, Congress interferes and we have no say in Congress.
Are you very optimistic about this, or is there reason to still be pessimistic given the political divide in Congress right now?
I am a hardworking optimistic is the way that I like to put it. We have the best shot we've had in a very long time We've advanced this bill farther than ever before in history, but we know that there's work to be done.
And to get it done, what gets it across the finish line in your estimation?
I think the biggest thing is we have to continue to increase support among the American people. We saw polling supporting statehood 4 years ago in the 30s, and we are now at 54. And so we're going to continue to work to teach people about what life in the district is really like, that we can go bowling, that we have a landfill, important things to become a state, as some of our opponents have pointed out. But that's the work we're going to do, and I think that's what's going to get us to the finish line, is getting that support among the public up higher.
Well, Bob, good luck to you. And again, the statistics to me speak for themselves. A larger population than 2 states, a larger gross domestic product than 16 states, more total federal tax dollars than 22 states, more active members of the military called DC home than 33 states. It is time for statehood for the District of Columbia in some fashion. Bob, good luck to you. And thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You got it.
We are on to something that is going to be amazing, but what we need is your help.
The number one problem is there's too much power in too few hands.
Every single problem that we have can be traced back to dark money.
They take large donors, they serve large donors.
So these handful of gatekeepers try to dictate everything.
Like all of you already know, they don't work for you, they work for their donors. So fire them and hire people who will only work for you, that say no corporate PAC money.
We are going to change the way we elect candidates in this country.
Uncorrupted Democrats. We're gonna fight for the issues and win on policy.
This is incredibly personal. We need free healthcare for everyone.
We're fighting for $15 minimum wage, single payer healthcare, debt-free college, and we are gonna get money out of politics once and for all.
I've taken a public pledge not to accept any corporate money.
Because the last thing we're gonna do is go into another presidential election and run a corporatist against a populist candidate.
At some point, the buck needs to stop, and it's gonna stop with us. It's gonna stop with Justice Democrats.
So who are we?
People who do not take corporate PAC money.
We're relying on small donors.
99.9% of our contributions came from people.
You're a Just Democrat, so you don't take any corporate PAC money.
I'm not influenced by money.
As a Justice Democrat, I made that pledge.
Not a penny.
Absolutely no.
I will go to Congress unbossed and unbought.
We try to create a government which works for all of us.
That is what America's about, and that's what a representative democracy should be about.
We are just getting warmed up here.
Vote for uncorrupted Democrats. The fight starts now, it starts today, and it starts with you.
I've been honest with him. Like, yeah, I was upset with you and I shouldn't have done it. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
Did you know that more than 20% of the world's oxygen comes from the Amazon? Why? Because of trees. I know what you're thinking. Of course! So what do we want to do? We want to plant more trees so we can save the climate. It's quite literal. So that's what leads to our new partner, Plant Your Change. Love it. It's so easy. What they do is you take the credit or debit cards you already have and you plug it into the system. And if you so choose, you get to round up every purchase to the nearest dollar and they plant a tree for you, okay? Now you could also choose if you wanna do it on only certain kinds of purchases or only so often, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But literally every cent makes a difference here. It's Plant Your Change. And if you wanna know more information, just go to tyt.com/trees. Let's go save the planet together.
Now, top. No. No. No.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
And welcome back to the conversation. I'm David Schuster. Facebook says it is soon going to start enforcing some consistent rules on politicians. So what exactly does that mean? Well, joining us now to talk about this is Katie Canales. She is a tech reporter for Business Insider, joins us from Austin, Texas. Katie, what is Facebook up to?
Right, so Facebook just said last week that it's going to keep Trump suspended from its platform until January 23. And so this is the latest development since Facebook initially banned Trump following the January 6th riot. And it's significant because Facebook is also saying that it's going to treat all users, including politicians, with the same set of rules. And that's a departure from how it has historically treated world leaders on its platform.
Because in the past, there was a certain newsworthiness, even if a Donald Trump or another world leader lied and it was clear that he was lying, but just because they were saying it, there was some newsworthiness behind it, right?
Yes, that's what company executives have said, that what world leaders say is newsworthy and therefore it deserves to be seen and heard by the public. So it said that it would not fact check or remove posts by those politicians, but as of last week, that will soon change.
Now, there was this advisory board recently, Facebook advisory board, which I've seen some people describe it as like the Facebook Supreme Court, which said that they had to be more clear about why they were suspending Donald Trump and essentially gave Facebook 6 months to sort of figure this out. So this latest action by Facebook, how does that dovetail with what this advisory board suggested?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like Facebook actually took its oversight board's advice to heart. After it banned Trump in January, it passed the case along to its oversight board to ask it to review its decision. And the board agreed with Facebook that it should have removed Trump, but it said that that Facebook should have decided the duration of the suspension, and that it applied kind of a vague penalty to Trump, which it shouldn't have done. So Facebook looks like it took the hint. It decided how long Trump should stay suspended for, and it also decided that it will apply the same set of rules to all of its users.
Now, how does Facebook go about making sure that those rules are applied equally, whether it's to the right, to the left, to people who believe that the Earth is flat? I mean, how does Facebook go about making sure that they can somehow police all of these statements across the spectrum?
That's probably going to have to be something that we wait and see. I mean, we're going to have to see how strictly it enforces this new change. That also applies to government leaders from around the world, not just U.S. politics. We saw something similar from a different company recently when Twitter deleted a post posted by the Nigerian president, and then the government responded by banning Twitter from the country. So we're gonna have to wait and see how strictly Facebook enforces this.
And I know a lot of users of social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, others have complained that in their own individual posts, they can be reported by somebody who doesn't like the post or doesn't like the language, and that sometimes these social media companies are very quick to suspend or ban somebody. Is that related to any of this?
I think how these platforms treat users at large online versus how they treat world leaders, they're somewhat different. These companies have historically taken a very hands-off approach to all of their users and how they moderate content. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, he's famously said that the company doesn't want to be the arbiters of truth. They don't want to decide what's right or what's wrong. So I think how these platforms moderate what users post, it differs from your ordinary everyday user versus how world leaders post. But as of last week, that will also soon change.
All right, that's a fair point. What about the point that sometimes it's not just what the politicians say, but it might be what their campaign says in an advertisement? That sometimes the advertisements can get into sort of a gray area of, well, the ad is suggesting a particular set of facts or opinions. It's not stating it for the record, and yet there are some people who say, well, that's a misleading ad, but is it a false ad? There are all sorts of areas of gray in this. How does Facebook deal with that?
It looks like this new change that it rolled out last week, it will likely apply to advertisements as well. And so we'll have to see, similarly to how Facebook cracks down on world leaders, we'll have to see how strictly it enforces this new change with political advertising.
And Katie, what's been the reaction both within the tech industry, but also in the political world to what Facebook has been up to?
I think everyone has really seen that this move is significant. Like I was saying, it really is a departure from how Facebook has treated world leaders on its platform. In 2 years, that is a somewhat long suspension. I don't know if surprising is the right word, but it is significant what Facebook did, and I think a lot of people have taken note of that, especially since the suspension ends on January 2023, which is importantly close to 2024 when Trump has said that he's seriously considering running for presidential office again.
Yeah, I mean, he could conceivably launch a new presidential campaign at the end of January, February in 2023, the year before, which is traditionally the time frame for when candidates decide they're going to go to New Hampshire or Iowa and start campaigning. So you would have Facebook going for him again, I suppose. Does this also take on some greater significance in that Donald Trump suggested, I don't really need Facebook or Twitter, I can create my own platform. He created his platform, it lasted less than 30 days, failed miserably because it didn't get very many views and seemed to be nothing more than a blog. Given how challenging it really is for politicians, businesses, entities to go ahead and try to get into this kind of platform business, does that make the decision by Facebook even perhaps more significant?
I think it does. I think a Trump ally has said that Trump's Facebook account, it's essential if he wants to run for presidential office again, specifically with his fundraising and online campaign strategy. So there is something riding on Trump's potential account being reinstated in January 2023. As far as having a mainstream platform to use to reach millions of people in real time, essentially, that was important for him during his presidency, and it arguably would be if he were to campaign for another run, especially since he will be barred from Twitter. Twitter also banned him after the January 6th riot. And it said in February that even if Trump does run for president in 2024, he will still not be allowed back on the website. So as of right now, Trump is releasing statements, to the public via his website, donaldjtrump.com, and he doesn't have access to a mainstream social media website.
And Katie, it wasn't that long ago when Facebook seemed to be in a little bit of trouble, particularly on the left. A lot of people have suggested that Facebook is a more conservative-leaning kind of site, that it features more conservative voices because of whatever algorithms or whatever the allegation was. And a number of people said, you know what, I'm giving up on Facebook. I'm getting off of it. I'm not going to use it anymore. Has that essentially stopped? Is there still a certain stink factor that enough people have with Facebook that Facebook is still concerned about it, or has that storm largely passed?
I do not think that storm has passed at all. I think we're still in the thick of it. I think some on the right, many on the right, are going to continue to hold the belief that tech platforms are bent on discriminating against conservative voices. I think
Well, it's also on I'd say, yeah, surely on the right now, but also it seems like, there's a conversion here, and that is a convergence, and that is there have been traditionally people on the left who don't trust Facebook, and I've got plenty of leftist friends who say I don't use Facebook anymore, I don't want to give them any business, and now it seems like there's a growing sentiment on the right as well, and I wonder if there's any danger to Facebook if you have the two sort of political opposites now both for different reasons in agreement saying, well, Facebook is really not a fair arbiter, we shouldn't be using the platform.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook's facing a lot of pressure from both sides of the aisle, not just the right. Democratic lawmakers, they have long said that social media websites, they don't do enough to police misinformation and hate speech online. So that's kind of the left scrutiny that Facebook is grappling with. But either way, these companies, including Facebook, they're facing a lot of pressure as they're navigating these challenging and complex content decisions. And yeah, like I said, they're getting it from both political parties.
And is the technology changing in any major significant way? Any major technological breakthroughs that we've seen on a company like Facebook over the last year?
Not that I know of. I think if anything, there's just more self-awareness from the company of the political climate. And how politicians are viewing or perceiving tech platforms in regard to what kind of content is being posted and how they're handling it. But regardless, we're in a political climate right now where anything that is posted online and how the company handles what is posted online is going to be politicized. And I don't think we're going to see that stop anytime soon.
And also more money, I would assume, going through Facebook and other social media platforms, given that television advertising continues to sort of shift away from traditional TV to online platforms where certainly more and more younger people are getting their news and information.
Yes, absolutely. I think Facebook's political advertising business is going to continue to be very lucrative and vital to a lot of different entities.
Katie, any predictions about what happens with Facebook over the next year and a half, 2 years? Any chance that this decision of theirs could change again?
I'm not sure. I think it's a little too soon to say. I think in regard to Trump, they're going to be watching his behavior. They're going to, like I said, reevaluate in early 2023. But as far as tweaking this change that it announced last week, I think it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to do regarding this new enforcement policy.
And certainly Donald Trump has turned on Zuckerberg. Trump in his latest speech said, "Oh, Zuckerberg wanted to be my friend while I was in the White House, and now he doesn't want anything to do with me because I'm out of power." So clearly, Donald Trump has signaled to his supporters that Facebook is not to be trusted, and there's still, of course, the anger on the left about how Facebook has been behaving towards progressives for many years. In any case, fascinating conversation. Katie Canales, she's the tech reporter with Business Insider. Katie, thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you got it. And that is our conversation. I'm David Schuster. Thanks for watching.
Hello, the Young Turks. Cenk Ugrianik Kasparian with you guys. Big show ahead. Lots of outrage as always. Democrats, Republicans. Now we have pre-crime. You know how it was in the movies? It's real now. And it's by the way targeted at your kids. So in different counties, if your kids have gotten bad grades or things along those lines, they will be targeted by law enforcement, and their lives will be ruined. So fun. Okay, there is a tiny bit of fun in the show though. In one of the commercial breaks, not in the main show, but in the commercial breaks, I'm kidding. We have a fun story of a nun stealing all sorts of money and gambling. That's our idea of fun here. But during one of the commercial breaks, I will be featured in one of the ads, so it'll be fun. Check that out, and we might ask you to vote on it. Not we might, we will. All right, but anyways, lots of stories to get to.
All right. Democrats are going after one of their own, Representative Ilhan Omar, after she asked a perfectly legitimate question to Anthony Blinken, who is the Secretary of State. Now, the question had to do with the investigations pertaining to war crimes that have been committed by various organizations or various governments. And so the critical statement, there was a critical statement following the, hold on, let's take that down. There was a critical statement by her colleagues following the exchange that you're about to watch right now with Representative Omar and Anthony Blinken. Take a look.
I know you opposed the court's investigation in both Palestine and in Afghanistan. I haven't seen any evidence in either cases that domestic courts both can and will prosecute alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. And I would emphasize that in Israel and Palestine, this includes crimes committed by both the Israeli security forces and Hamas. In Afghanistan, it includes crimes committed by the Afghan national government and the Taliban. So in both of these cases, if domestic courts can't or won't pursue justice, and we oppose the ICC, where do we think the victims of these supposed crimes can go for justice?
So that was an important question to ask because the International Criminal Court, which wants to probe the Israeli government for possible war crimes against the Palestinian people in Gaza, is something that the United States government, the Biden administration specifically, does not support. So she's trying to ask, well, if you don't agree with the International Criminal Court investigating this, and we can't rely on domestic governments to investigate their own war crimes, then how do you propose we do these investigations? And that very question offended dozens of her own colleagues, and I'll tell you who in just a minute, but Cenk, go ahead.
Yeah, first, the context is really important there. And you just saw the context. It's in the context of specific cases of the International Criminal Court. Now, as Anna's gonna tell you, they will pretend that context did not exist. So I will go further than Ilhan Omar, but she did not go that far. She explained exactly what she meant, and those are cases that are being adjudicated. So I want you to understand that as you see how they're going to mangle what she said as usual.
So following that exchange with Blinken, and of course Blinken gave a non-answer to it. It's not even worth showing, to be quite honest with you, but you can check it out online. Following that exchange, she tweeted the following: "We must have the same level of accountability and justice for all victims of crimes against humanity. We have seen unthinkable atrocities committed by the United States, Hamas, Israel, Afghanistan, and the Taliban. I ask Secretary Blinken where people are supposed to go for justice." Now, following that, 12 Democratic lawmakers decided to sign a statement condemning Representative Omar for her statement, which, by the way, is completely accurate. Okay, and the reason why they're upset is because they feel that it's wrong to compare the United States and the Israeli government to Hamas and the Taliban. So these 25 Jewish Democrats in the House of Representatives had signed this letter. The 25 members of—
No, I just want to be clear about it. 12 wound up signing.
I'm sorry, 12 did, my bad. But 25 of them had gotten together to figure out what they wanted to do moving forward with Ilhan Omar.
And Anna, I just right before the show got an excellent source from inside DC that explained that some of those 25 actually fought back and wanted to protect Ilhan Omar. But we'll get to that in a second. Let's see what the 12 said.
Right. So, as I mentioned, 25 get together. They're trying to figure out how to, I guess, tackle this issue. And in the end, 12 of them had agreed to sign a public statement. And this is what the public statement said: equating the United States to Israel. Equating the United States and Israel to Hamas and the Taliban is as offensive as it is misguided, the 12 Democrats wrote in the statement, adding that false equivalencies give cover to terrorist groups. And Congressman Brad Sherman actually took it a step further by releasing another statement where he says this: it's not news that Ilhan Omar would make outrageous and clearly false statements about America and Israel. What's newsworthy is that she admits Hamas is guilty of unspeakable atrocities. It's time for all of Israel's detractors to condemn Hamas, and it is time for all those of goodwill to reject any moral equivalency between the United States and Israel on one hand, and Hamas and the Taliban on the other. So, the United States has committed war crimes. We've committed war crimes fairly recently, under Donald Trump, certainly under the Obama administration. Obama conducted a drone strike on a US citizen with no due process. He murdered a US citizen using a drone strike and then killed his 16-year-old son using a drone strike as well. I mean, you can go back decades and talk about how the United States orchestrated coups in various countries, including Guatemala, on behalf of business interests here in the United States. That led to the slaughter of countless indigenous people, not just in Guatemala, but in other Latin American countries. I know that we like to pretend that in the US, whenever we commit war crimes, it's okay because we do it to spread democracy. But we know what the reality of the situation is, and we can't pretend as if our actions are totally fine, even when it leads to countless deaths, which we later refer to as collateral damage.
Is Brad Sherman your congressperson?
Yeah, Brad Sherman is my congressperson. Certainly will not be voting for him. I hope that he gets primaried.
Interesting about that. All right, so I have a lot to say about this, but first, I want to tell you about the good folks who fought back, okay? So look, there's rising anti-Semitism in the country, and I don't want any progressive to conflate the issues we have with Israeli foreign policy, Israeli policy, and American policy with anything else. So yes, it was reported that 25 Jewish Democrats got together to talk, but you have to understand a lot of people in the room did not want to sign the statement, and more than half of them did not sign it. And in fact, some people in the room argued vociferously against it. So I want to be careful. So I'm going to read this statement I have from a well-placed source in DC. They say that Jamie Raskin was reportedly approached, and according to someone at the meeting, declined to be part of the effort and asked whether the point was to advance international law and human rights or to give people another chance to take a shot at Ilhan. Raskin declined comment. So Jamie Raskin was in that meeting, and apparently he was one of the people who fought back vigorously and said this is a really bad idea. So understand some of the top progressives of the country, some of the top Democrats in the country, including on this issue, are Jewish Democrats. So God bless Jamie Raskin for doing that. Now, let's get to the core of the issue. Ilhan Omar had a great tweet about this. She said, basically like, oh, you guys are all my colleagues when you need my vote.
We have that tweet.
Yeah, let's go to it, and then I want to give you more context.
Yeah, so she specifically called them out. There we go. It's shameful for colleagues who call me when they need my support to now put out a statement asking for clarification and not just call. The Islamophobic tropes in this statement are offensive. The constant harassment and silencing from the signers of this letter is unbearable. And I'm glad that she's fighting back against it because she's calling it what it is. She didn't say anything that was inaccurate.
Yeah, so now if you're a United States congressperson and either you saw the video we showed you of Ilhan Omar putting it into context and you chose to smear her instead and you never even called her for clarification, and you used her tweet as an excuse, or you saw her tweet and you didn't bother calling her, hey, Ilhan, what did you mean by this? My dear colleague, when I come to you for votes on corporate issues that my backers want, I always go, oh, my colleague, and Ilhan Omar and AOC and all the other Justice Democrats. You don't want to upset your colleagues. We're your friends and allies, etc. But even if you didn't see the video and you missed the entire context, you had a whole meeting. Some people in the meeting said that they knew the context and they defended her. So you knew, and you chose to smear her anyway. So don't come around here with colleagues. And so the guys who smeared her are, of course, more conservative Democrats. Of course. By the way, God knows what they're covering up and why they wanted to distract with this issue. And it is a giant distraction. And by the way, hurts their own party. So now it gives the Republicans an opening to say, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ilhan Omar, I can't tell the difference. Now we can show you the facts, the context, we can show you everything. Now she's talking about a specific case in the International Criminal Court. Marjorie Taylor Greene is talking about Jewish space lasers. But these Democrats, what happened to unity, by the way? These are conservative Democrats who are supposed to be like, oh, unity, unity, unity. Only if they want their priorities, which are almost always corporate priorities, right? But when it comes to any other issue, they're like, oh, Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, Donald Trump, how can we help you?
Totally.
How can we help you destroy our own party? Because we don't give a damn about unity. All we care about is the people who pay our checks, the campaign contributions. That's why uncorrupted politicians like Ilhan Omar, all the Justice Democrats, and Jamie Raskin are so important. And to the point that she was making about covering up war crimes, they say, oh, how could you say this about our beloved America and Israel? We have court systems that adjudicate this, unlike Hamas. And we were elected in a democracy. Well, it's uncomfortable, but Hamas was elected. And then as soon as they were elected, we said, oh, that one doesn't count, that one doesn't count. If we don't like it if you pick the guy we didn't want, right? But more importantly, what court system, what fairness? So remember the Apache helicopter video that Chelsea Manning exposed? Well, she was put in jail for it, but no one who actually murdered those journalists in Iraq, those are Americans, none of them went to jail. Kirkow exposed that we were torturing people in the CIA. He went to jail for exposing it. None of the torturers went to jail. None. Let alone the bank bailouts if we're talking about other domestic issues where none of the bankers who crashed our economy went to jail because our justice system is a joke. It protects the rich, it protects the powerful, and most of all, it protects corporations that run this whole country, right? And their executives and the people that they donate to. So, and if you look here, and I'll give you an example about Israel now. In Israel, they say, well, if you have deeds from hundreds of years ago saying that something is your property or your house, you're allowed to go and brutalize Palestinians that are there. And oh, so we're using the court system, we're using the court system. And then Palestinians go and say, okay, well, here was my deed to my house pre-1948. I was in that house in 1948, and there's no question it's my house. Here's the deed. The Israeli court system says, no, you're a Palestinian, you don't count. You're not allowed to use your deeds. You're not allowed to have property disputes. You don't count. So let's just be real and honest. Now, last things, I'll go further than Ilhan Omar. So I don't think it's just the international court cases. Yes, I mean, Brad Sherman and the rest, they have some point. There is a false equivalency. Israel kills way more innocent Palestinians than Hamas kills innocent Israelis. I don't want either side killing anyone innocent, any civilian at all. And they're like, oh yeah, do you condemn Hamas? That's the easiest thing in the world. Of course we condemn people when they hit innocent civilians. And they say, ha, okay, so good, you condemn Hamas. Well, do you condemn Israel when they kill 10 times, 20 times as many innocent civilians, including children? No, they're beloved. Okay, well, your bias is screaming through. And so the people who have a problem are not Ilhan Omar who are calling out the facts. It's the people who are intensely hypocritical, very conservative while being in the Democratic Party, and that is destroying the credibility of the Democratic Party, and their foreign policy objectives are hideous, and their attacks at fellow Democrats are unconscionable.
All right, let's get to our next story because it looks like the progressives in Congress are finally waking up and planning on fighting back against some of these concessions that the Biden administration is willing to give to the GOP. So, progressive members of the House of Representatives are now considering potentially holding their vote on Biden's infrastructure bill should he decide to give up key provisions pertaining to climate change. Now, this all started after the National Climate Advisor, Gina McCarthy, suggested that climate policies proposed in Biden's original American Jobs Plan, that's the infrastructure bill, such as a clean electricity standard, could be left on the cutting room floor as the president seeks a compromise deal with a bipartisan group of senators. Now, Biden has moved on from working with a group of GOP senators because maybe he finally realized that they were negotiating in bad faith. Now he's working with a bipartisan group of senators who are also negotiating in bad faith because they don't want to raise any taxes on the rich in order to raise revenue to pay for the infrastructure bill. But nonetheless, in response to that, you finally have some Democratic lawmakers who are saying, no, not gonna vote for this unless it includes these key provisions on climate change. Martin Heinrich is one example who said an infrastructure package that goes light on climate and energy and clean energy should not count on every Democratic vote. Ed Markey was even more clear by saying that he would not vote for it. No climate, no deal. Obviously, he's from the Senate. And Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez also said that Biden and Senate Democrats should take a step back and ask themselves if playing patty cake with GOP senators is really worth the dismantling of people's voting rights, setting the planet on fire, allowing massive corporations and the wealthy to not pay their fair share of taxes, etc. So it seems like they're threatening to hold their vote as a block. And if they do that, understand that they have the leverage, right? The legislation would not pass in the House if progressive members of Congress did decide to hold their vote as a block. Now, whether or not they're actually gonna do it is another question, but I do like that they're at least thinking about doing that and at least thinking about using the leverage they do have to get some of the concessions that progressives deserve and need.
Yeah, and it goes beyond that too. But first I wanna say, told you. And this is not to go, oh yeah, I'm a talk show host who got it right, yay me, okay? I do that plenty, don't get me wrong. But in this case, it has a very important point. We said that Biden didn't really want to do the Green New Deal parts of the infrastructure bill and that he would take it out. And we were told, no, Cenk, Anna, Young Turks, you guys don't understand. You're being hysterical. Biden is FDR 2.0. And he said it. Well, when a politician says something, they obviously mean it, right? No, not obviously. Now, why did we say that he wasn't gonna do it? Because we know Biden's track history. We know what drives politics. What drives politics is the donors. And the donors don't want the Green New Deal part of it. They never wanted it, they don't want it now. Under no circumstances do they want it. We told you they would keep the parts that would help only corporations. And so right now, what is the Republican proposal that they're negotiating over? They're negotiating over how do we privatize these roads and do tolls and different gas tax, etc., to make sure Americans pay for it. Romney and the other Republicans are insisting no taxes ever for any corporations or the rich. We're not gonna allow a single cent to be raised from that. I told you, I told you, I told you. Now Manchin, and not just Manchin, don't let Biden hide behind Manchin. Biden is going, well, okay, well, and now that's a second I told you. I said to you that the Democrats, if they were lucky, would get to between 800 billion and 1.1 trillion. And even though he had proposed 2.2 to 2.3 trillion. Oh, Cenk, how do you know? You don't know, you're being so unfair to Biden. Well, I do know, how do I know? I'm not a mind reader. Chris Coons, his top ally in the Senate. God, is there a single reporter in Washington? Chris Coons comes out on television and says 800 billion. That's a Democrat from Delaware. When he says that, that means they're very likely going to end up at around 800 billion. Right now, they're discussing 900 billion. Told you, it's not at all complicated. You can figure it out too, and our audience is 1,000 times smarter and often does talk about that way better than any reporter. Now, the most important part of all this is that means you should fight back. We asked you to fight back earlier because we knew that he wasn't gonna do $15 minimum wage, and I can go down the list, including this, right? Now the great news is they are. So if you wanna push them when they're not fighting, great, that's smart and strategic politics. when they are fighting, if you still say, oh, no, not good enough, yeah, just Democrats are the worst. Well, no, it looks like you were trying to destroy progressives. Because right now, they're doing the right thing. AOC and the rest are saying, no deal. No, even Ed Markey, no deal. Jamal Bowman, no deal, no deal. We're not gonna give you our vote. The one more thing, when they say no deal, they say, well, you know what they're gonna do, and this is upcoming now. I'm gonna tell you ahead of time about this. Now you will see a slew of articles in the next couple of days and weeks where the mainstream media, the corporate media, will back the corporate Democrats. They'll say, tut, these Justice Democrats and this squad, how dare they could kill this whole bill. Is a half a loaf is better than no loaf at all. That's actually not true. Actually, the majority of the Republican proposal, and by the way, when Biden says yes, he's taking the Republican proposal, not the Democratic proposal. The Republican proposal, most of it is taking the COVID relief bill that they bragged about and repurposing it. That's most of the money. And then they're gonna sprinkle a little bit on top, and that all goes to private corporations to rebuild the roads, and you pay for it. I don't even want that deal. That's not half a loaf. That goes backwards. That goes backwards and uses up money that was supposed to go to the American people for a different purpose. So every part of this stinks, and I love that the Justice Democrats are fighting back.
All right, so when we come back from the break, we'll discuss what's happening in New York and the efforts to pass a single-payer healthcare system in that state. Unfortunately, there are the usual suspects who are fighting against it, but there are unusual suspects also fighting against it. We'll give you those details and more when we come back.
Back in the Young so many great comments. First of all, John Simon, thank you, brother. Just join by hitting the join button below. I'm gonna get back to that later in the show, because we have an announcement about it. A Little Krabby Dragon said in our members section, I can always count on TYT for clarity and digging deeper on every issue. I love all of you. Well, we love you too. Effectus says, easy way to push Biden on climate change. Point out that we have been less than 5 years before devastating, irreversible change. If he was in office for 4 of those years and did next to nothing, the American people will never forgive him. It doesn't matter. I love your brother, but nothing's gonna break through to him. He doesn't hear it. All he hears is corporations whispering in his ear, sweet nothings, going, oh yeah, oh half a loaf is great, a quarter of a loaf, a negative loaf is great, it's great, Joe, you're such a hero. And then, I can't help it. Like, the people that frustrated me the most in that $15 minimum wage fight, and that are now very slowly turning around are not the just Democrats in Congress. It's the progressive groups. All of them seeking access desperately. Oh my God, FDR 2.0. No, he was never gonna do it. Half a loaf sucks, and it's not half a loaf. So anyway, you're not gonna get through to Biden. This presidency's already over. Make you see the silver-haired dragon writes in, I do hope Omar does not apologize this time. She's correct to call out our and Israelis' violence and interference in other countries' politics. No, they've learned that lesson a long time ago. No, she's not at all apologizing. And her and the rest of the Just Democrats are fighting back super hard. Oh, by the way, Cori Bush was a great voice on that too. Tommy Too Strong says the US and Israel's hands aren't clean, even when it comes to Hamas and the Taliban themselves. Israel helped create Hamas to oppose the PLO, and the US helped create the Taliban, the Mujahideen, to oppose the Soviet Union. Those are absolute facts. Of course, no one in mainstream media knows that, or they like to actively cover it up. Oh, Hamas, I don't know where they came from. What am I, a journalist? All right, now let me go to, speaking of foreign policy, let me go to YouTube Super Chat. Sean Umpley writes in, Anna and the TYT team nailed the coverage on the Peru election. I have friends who voted there and feel Castillo is the same as Biden, not what they wanted, but better than the alternative. TYT rules.
Thank you. I really appreciate it because those stories, I go through a lot to make sure that I get the facts right. And just to be open and honest with you guys, it's frustrating to go through all of that hard work, make sure I get the facts right, and then deal with former employees from this company trashing us based on nothing, and then people just believe what they have to say. So I appreciate that kind message, and that's what keeps me going.
100%, and it's so easy to lie about us. Anyway, that's a whole long story. They're the worst. All they do is try to profit off of their goddamn lies. Anyways, we got to take a break. So many of you are so wonderful. We'll be right back and read a couple more comments. All right, back on the Young Turks. I just want to give a shout out to a couple of YouTube Super Chat folks who are so nice with both their contributions and their comments. Sean Umpleby wrote in, TYT deserves the support. The TYT Army earned it. We make TYT. Keep it up, team. We appreciate and love your hard work, Steel Dragon. Thank you guys. And you do. You absolutely make up TYT. There's a lot of lies about, where we get our money from. It's insanity. It's from you guys. So everybody who hits that join button, goes to tyt.com/change, etc. You are the ones who support us and make this show possible. We're nothing without you guys. And British 32 wrote in, hi Cenk and Anna, great combo as normal tonight. Do you think Omar, AOC, and Justice and Progressive Dems will use their votes as power now that more than double standards have been exposed again on a basic comment she made, TYT 2021? Thank you for the question. I just want to clarify real quick, guys. We do nuance on TYT. We do it, we're proud of it, and it's the smart and right thing to do. So if the Just Democrats people are trying to force them into a nonsensical vote that doesn't make any sense, we're gonna say no. If people are forcing them into a vote that is desperately needed, like the $15 minimum wage, we're gonna say yes. So now when they call out the corporate Democrats, we say yes, that's awesome. But if at the end they cave and they give them their votes on a terrible bill, we'll say no. And we'll say that was wrong. Because facts matter, they just do. And if you listen to people who say facts don't matter, only my emotions matter, and I'm gonna rage and call everyone else corrupt, etc., without any facts to back it up, well, that's your choice. But I love our audience because you guys are smart and strategic just like that. All right, Anna.
Well, we have some news about a single-payer healthcare system in New York. Unfortunately, there's a huge obstacle. So, the majority of lawmakers in New York's legislature actually support a bill that would change its healthcare system to a single-payer healthcare system. It's very similar to what the bill in California in 2017 was attempting to do. Since we can't get single-payer on a national level, California in 2017 thought, why don't we do it statewide? That effort failed, and now, unfortunately, it looks like this effort in New York State is set to fail as well. Not because the lawmakers are against it, but because there are two different groups of people actively fighting against it and preventing Democratic leadership in the state from even allowing a vote on it. So the bill, known as the New York Health Act, has passed the state assembly 5 times before. This year, the legislative session is coming to a close with the New York Health Act stuck in committee, not even having received a vote in the assembly. So why is that? What's going on? Well, as the Daily Poster reports, advocates say that under pressure from both insurance corporations and yes, labor unions, New York legislative leaders are not planning to hold an up or down vote on the measure before the legislative session ends on Thursday. So again, it's a popular bill among voters in New York. The state legislature overwhelmingly supports it. It would easily pass, but it's being held up in committee by Democratic leadership in that state as a result of private healthcare interests and labor unions, which Cenk, take it away.
Yeah, so look, again, this requires nuance. Unions are wonderful on so many different things. And when they take on big corporations and they organize, you get collective bargaining, which you desperately need, okay? On the other hand, recently in America, for whatever reason, and I'm going to explain one of the reasons for you in this context. Unions have supported pro-corporate positions, and that is maddening. And I guess in a country that has runaway crony capitalism, maybe it's not that surprising. So, and Glenn Greenwald, I disagree with a lot of what he says recently, but half of what he says is still very good, and especially references to his old work. And he had this theory on rotating villains on Democrats, which I agreed with and wrote about over a decade ago, okay? And now unions are beginning to do rotating villains. So in one state, we'll have the SEIU oppose single payer healthcare, and now in New York, they're the good guys, and they're helping with single payer healthcare. Well, when they're the good guys, I'm super happy to have them, great, right? By the way, there's one union that's always been the good guys, it's the nurses union. They've been wonderful on this issue, the best fighters on this issue. But here we are in New York, we picked a different union. This time the teachers,
yeah, the United Federation of Teachers.
Yeah, I want to be specific. Thank you, Anna.
Yes.
United Federation of Teachers, because do not lump everybody together. Do not lump all unions together, etc. Okay, but in this case, they are actively fighting against single-payer healthcare, and it is swinging the balance because the Democrats have complete control in New York. Yeah, golly gee, they can't pass anything. And on this one, just like in California, they had a super majority. And how do they prevent? And Wolfpack has gone through this 100 times on the issue of money in politics. And yes, it's almost always the Democrats now that block progress. And that doesn't let the Republicans off the hook. They're usually the bad guys as well, if not more. But it is democratically controlled states like New York and California where they can just pass anything they want and they choose not to. And the way that they do that is they go, well, we all agree except, oh golly gee, there's just one person but he controls such an important committee and he won't let it out of committee. Oh, well, golly gee, he made it out of committee and everybody voted yes, but the assembly leader in California won't put it up for a vote. And on the issue of money in politics, constantly they won't put it up for a vote. Because if they put it up for a vote, then they're gonna have to say, oh yeah, I was lying the whole time. I actually served my donors. I don't serve you at all. Eric Olson was a local progressive candidate in California, had the best quote on this. He said, we have a super majority. Who are we negotiating with? We're not negotiating with the Republicans. We're negotiating with our donors. That is exactly right. And in this case, why would the unions be against healthcare for everybody? Well, there's a very good reason why. They claim, their claims are already terrible, but there's actually another reason. They claim, well, we already negotiated good rates for our union members, so we don't want anybody else to have it. Oh God,
so let me be more specific because that's not quite their argument. What they are arguing, and I don't think it's a good argument, is that they negotiated healthcare plans on behalf of their workers, and that required maybe sacrificing wages to ensure that. But here's the thing. So in the case of the New York City Municipal Labor Committee, right? This is the labor committee that's fighting aggressively against this effort to provide single-payer healthcare. They're essentially saying, look, we're against this unless the bill is written in such a way that there are carve-outs for our workers. So just understand that for a second. They're actually working against their workers in this scenario because you would have a single payer healthcare system free at the point of service. You don't have to worry about deductibles, you don't have to worry about co-pays, you don't have to worry about premiums, okay? They want to ensure that their workers wouldn't get to benefit from that single payer healthcare system and would have to rely on the private health insurance that's provided by their employer, which clearly, based on how private insurance works, is nowhere near as good as a single payer healthcare plan would be.
So that's 100% right with one caveat. I mean, that caveat is really important and we get to it in a second. But so following up on what Anna's saying, so those unionized workers, you are still better off under single payer. That's absolutely true, and I'm glad she clarified that. But the argument, the public argument that we negotiated for rates for a system that is not as good as single payer, but better than everyone else in this brutal system, is not a winning argument. That's an argument saying I'm slightly above you on the totem pole, and I want to make sure that I stay that way. And again, that's a terrible argument. Second terrible part of their public argument is, well, we already negotiated that. then why don't, now if we have single payer healthcare, you know what you would get to do? You would get to negotiate again, and this time argue for higher wages.
100%. In fact, it would be way easier to negotiate higher wages under a single payer healthcare system because workers are not tethered to their job based on health insurance benefits. I mean, how many people want to leave, they want upward mobility, but they feel like, hey, I can't leave as a result of this healthcare system. I can't lose the healthcare coverage.
And you would, not only would you have healthcare for your workers, you would get to argue for higher wages, but you also gain leverage because they can leave, as Anna pointed out, right? So why would you make such a terrible argument in public? Because there's an even worse reason why they're actually against it. Because some of the unions have insurance that they are providing, not the employers. And that's what helps hook people into unions, because they are, generally speaking, good healthcare, right? So they think, well, then they might not want to join a union if they already have completely free healthcare. That gets rid of the need to use our pretty good healthcare at the union. Oh, no, you cannot do that, man. That's in the union's self-interest, but that's not in the union members' self-interest. That's not in the workers' interest. It is brazenly corrupt, brazenly corrupt. We want to support the teachers so bad. We supported every teacher strike here, and they desperately needed those raises. And here comes their leadership in their unions saying, we don't want people to get health care because of our greed. It's unconscionable. And you really gotta give credit to and support excellent journalists like David Sirota.
And Julia Rock, who wrote this story in the Daily Poster.
David started Daily Poster and Julia wrote that story. And there's others like Ryan Grimm, etc., who are progressive journalists who are unafraid to call out anybody no matter what side they're on. And that is very rare. So understand that in New York, if you don't have single payer healthcare, it was both corporations, corrupt Democrats, and yes, unfortunately, some of the unions who screwed you here.
All right, we have a COVID vaccine related block coming up. I want to take the break a little early, get that out of the way. And when we come back, we'll discuss, yes, the lab leak story. It's developed to the point where I feel comfortable sharing the details without sharing any misinformation unwittingly. And then later in the same block, we'll also talk about some of the insane conspiracy theories that were shared in an Ohio State hearing about the COVID vaccine. Come right back.
So I want to announce a membership change here at TYT. So we tried a $1.99 level on YouTube channel memberships. Now at that price, we honestly lose money on it. There's a number of costs that go into it, etc. But we tried it for a while and then eventually became unsustainable. So we've taken that $1.99 off YouTube channel membership. But I want to explain to you guys that you have a couple of more options. So first of all, a lot of people didn't even know that they were signing up for $1.99, which did not have the bonus episode as part of the membership benefits. And so now everybody who signs up gets membership benefits, at least at the introductory level included, which includes the bonus episode that we do every single day. So you could, the folks who are at $1.99 on YouTube, please, if you can, join us at $4.99 or even better at $9.99, where you get even more privileges. And these privileges sounds weird. It's more videos, more content, etc. And we're going to start doing AMAs and all these other wonderful things with our members, okay? But we decided to do a second thing because we know that some people just can't afford it, and they're trying to support us in any way that they can, and we deeply, deeply appreciate that. So on our website, we've now offered up basically a subsidized $1.99, okay? So part of it we're doing, but then we're gonna ask you guys to help subsidize it as well. Because for example, on Twitch, there's such a great community where they're constantly gifting subs to one another. And we know some people want membership. The good news about the $1.99 on our website is it gets the benefits of membership. So you will get the bonus episode, okay? So we did a limited number of those just from TYT's perspective, even though we know we're losing money on it. You can go to tyt.com/join to take advantage of that. Those will probably run out pretty soon. So then we thought a lot about how can we get this wonderful community to help one another, right? And we're asking you guys from time to time to upgrade because it makes a giant difference for us and allows us to do more reporting and so much more content, right? So one of the ways that we came up with was if you sign up at $25 a month, and some of you can do that and we'd love you for it, we're gonna subsidize one other person to get a $1.99 membership that could only afford that, right? If you sign up at $50, we're gonna subsidize 5. If you sign up at $100, we're gonna subsidize 10 of those. Now, I know that's a lot to ask, so obviously do whatever you can, and if you can't do anything, that's okay. We love you anyway, just watch the show. Even if you just subscribe to us on YouTube for free, that also makes a big difference. So we appreciate everyone trying to help in every way, and we just appreciate you watching. But members do sustain us, so if you can, please help out both us and other folks that can get the show at that $1.99. By going to tyt.com/join, either join or upgrade, and you'll see all of your options. So thank you guys for understanding and for helping one another as we try to get not only the truth out through the show, but also to drive positive change in the world. And we love doing that with you guys. I'll have more of your comments in the next break. Thank you. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. I asked for membership during the social break we had, and here we go right now. Christopher Johangen, David S., Molly Says, Amanda Hobson, all just joined by hitting the join button below. Now everybody that gets YouTube channel membership going forward gets the bonus episode, and we're gonna have a great one tonight about the hypocrisy of the right wing on the use of the N-word. And then I'm going to read one fun YouTube super chat. Ray Turner, AKA the Bearded Dragon, wrote in, Anna, excellent Welsh pronunciation last night.
I don't know what that means. Oh, wait, yeah, someone wrote in a comment and it had some stuff in there, some Welsh stuff in there.
Okay, well, this is the worst thank you I've ever seen.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks guys. All right, what's next?
All right, so Joe Biden is calling for a full investigation into the origins of the coronavirus, and he is, of course, referring to some plausibility regarding the lab leak theory. Now, this story's been developing. I've been holding off because there are all sorts of questionable actors at play. However, it does appear that there is some indication that a lab leak in Wuhan, China is the origin of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, let me be clear, it has not been proven yet, but the previous thought of it being literally impossible was inaccurate. Now, of course, people also felt that it was nothing more than a conspiracy theory based on who it was coming from. Someone like Donald Trump, who most people, I think, do feel a little skeptical about. However, a report on the origins of the COVID-19 virus by the US government and its national laboratory concluded that the hypothesis claiming that the virus leaked from a Chinese lab in Wuhan is in fact plausible and deserves further investigation, which is why Biden is calling for a full investigation into that. Now, the study was prepared in May of 2020 by the Lawrence Livermore National Library in California and laboratory in California and was drawn by the State Department when it conducted an inquiry into the pandemic's origins during the final months of the Trump administration. So what makes this study important is that it was done by a reputable organization. And so that's part of the reason why Biden's taking it seriously. That's the reason why the State Department's taking it seriously. And so I'm uncertain about whether or not we're actually gonna get to the bottom of it, but it is important to keep in mind that this theory is plausible, and if it is proven to be true, I think that there are some pretty serious consequences for our institutions, which are already dealing with, honestly, a lack of trust among voters and Americans in general.
Yeah, so I'm really disturbed by this story. So when coronavirus first broke, we found out that there was a virus lab in Wuhan. First thing I thought is, well, that's an awfully strange coincidence. So a virus naturally broke out right next to a virus lab. It could happen, but probably the odds are against it. But you know what? I trust the scientists. And so that is why I'm really discouraged by a letter that Lancet put out. And that's a very respected journal. And I relied on that letter. And look, guys, there's fog of war in not just war, but in many things that happen quickly where we haven't gotten all the facts yet. So sometimes there's an active shooter and people say, oh, he's a Christian terrorist, he's a Muslim terrorist, he's this, he's that, it's personal, it's not personal. And there's also some wild theories going out there in the first 24, 48 hours, right? I can give you 1,000 examples from etc. And in this case, the science was unsettled for so long because it was a novel coronavirus, right? It's a novel virus. And so we counseled you all throughout, be careful with the information that's coming out. Let's listen to the scientists, the collection of scientists, but some things in science are very well settled, like climate change and gravity. Those are settled, right? Now there's the people who want to manufacture doubt about them, usually working at the oil companies and the people that fund that, right? But there are things that are not settled. Where did coronavirus come from, et cetera. So when Lancet put out a letter from a collection of doctors saying it is pretty much definitely not man-made, I believe that. That is why the erosion of trust in these institutions is deeply problematic. It leads people to wild conspiracy theories when you find out that some of the best journals didn't do it right. And so they should do a deep investigation as to who signed on to the idea that it was definitely not man-made. Because now we find out, no.
There's a possibility.
And guys, understand that it's not settled today, right? There's a lot more work to be done on it, so we don't know for sure. But now they've opened up the possibility of, oops, it might be man-made.
Right, and
that's a very large oops.
And the central issue here is the type of research that some of these scientists do in these labs. It's known as gain of function. And so I think that the scientists who signed on to this Lancet letter condemning anyone who called into question whether this was a lab leak was really fueled and motivated by potentially like their self-interest and a fear that the way gain of function is funded, that research is funded, could become an issue, right? So I do want to read you a few excerpts from the letter that the Lancet had published on its website early on in the pandemic, again, condemning anyone who says that it was a lab leak. And now it turns out that there is some possibility that it was a lab leak. Again, it hasn't been proven, I want to be clear about that. But they wrote at the Lancet that the rapid, open, and transparent sharing of data on this outbreak is now being threatened by rumors and misinformation around its origins. We stand together to strongly condemn conspiracy theories suggesting that COVID-19 does not have a natural origin. And when they talk about natural origin, what they're referring to is humans getting it from animals, like eating bats, for instance. That was one of the things that was pretty prominent in the beginning of the pandemic. Now, conspiracy theories, they continue to write, do nothing but create fear, rumors, and prejudice that jeopardize our global collaboration in the fight against the virus. We support the call from the Director General of the World Health Organization to promote scientific evidence and unity over misinformation and conjecture. But one thing that I should note is that a World Health Organization advisory board member, his name is Jamie Metzel, was disgusted by that statement by The Lancet because he felt like there was politics at play. He explains that in a little more detail in this clip. Yes, it's on Fox News, but I think what he says here is important. Take a look.
The question is, going forward, what was the motivation? Because apparently that Lancet statement was organized by Peter Daszak, the president of EcoHealth, that funneled the money from the NIH to the lab, and he didn't want the gain of function narrative getting legs.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. Certainly, many people, or the small number of people actually, who were raising this issue in early last year were labeled conspiracy theorists. Right. I know because I was one of them. And yes, there were some people who were called right-wing nuts, but I'm not a right-wing nut. I'm actually a progressive Democrat. And so for me, the question isn't, is this a right-wing or left-wing thing? It's just, let's look at the data and just be honest. And you're absolutely right. That Lancet letter published in February of last year was an outrage because without sufficient data, the authors of that letter declared that it's very, very likely a natural origin and called anybody like me who was raising possible alternatives a conspiracy theorist. And one of the reasons why I've called for Richard Horton, the editor-in-chief of The Lancet, to step down is because I feel that letter, it was not data-driven science. It was scientific propaganda and thuggery. And Peter Daszak, you correctly point out, manipulated that process behind the scenes, hiding the fact that a number of the signatories were on his payroll and in many other ways. So that's why we need data-driven science.
Yeah.
So I think he's right there. And look, this is the problem. It's not just like the right wingers who don't trust our institutions. People in general in America right now don't trust our institutions. They don't trust the CDC, they don't trust our corporate media, they don't trust our politicians. That's part of the reason why when someone like Donald Trump utters that it was a lab leak, people like me, to be quite honest with you, dismiss it because he said all sorts of insane things, including injecting disinfectant in order to fight the virus if you contract it. So this is the issue. This problem is only going to be exacerbated by this story, even if it's proven that it wasn't a lab leak. I don't even think it matters at this point. The institutions in this country have failed the American people. I don't know what to believe. When this story first broke, Cenk, I was like, I don't know, do I trust Biden? Because Biden has all sorts of warmongering rhetoric in regard to China. Is this part of that? Right? So it's hard to know who to trust and who to believe. And that's an issue in this country.
Yeah, look, in this case, I'm glad Biden called for an investigation. I would not go any further than that. We are not in favor of necessarily of sanctions or war or any insanity, right? No. You can please, for God's sake, everybody, you do nuance, right? So let's talk it through in this particular case. So you can tell, Fox News 101 is to use so-called progressives to attack progressives. This is not one of those cases. People that they use like that, they don't often refer to right-wing nuts on Fox News. And I don't know if you could tell, but when he said that, Ducey was trying to get him off of that. He tried to interrupt when he said right-wing nuts twice, right? So there's a real scientist who was right. It appears was right from the get-go, right? And he's so right about Lancet and that Peter Daszak, who wrote the letter and got others to sign on to it, because actually calling legitimate things like this scientist was saying as a possibility to investigate, calling those conspiracy theories, nothing helps conspiracy theories more than that.
Exactly, 100%.
Because then you go, wait a minute, but Gulf of Tonkin, we know that America was lying about that. Look, I would argue the JFK killings is a preposterous government explanation, but everyone in mainstream media goes, oh no, conspiracy theory, right? On the other hand, there's tons of actual conspiracy theories that are nowhere near true, including one we're gonna cover later in the show today about how if you take the vaccine, metal sticks to you. Right? But then the conspiracy theorists like the Alex Jones of the world, and now some on the left, get to go, oh, well, you see that? You can't believe anything, so it must be the aliens. Or everybody's a crisis actor, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I'm so mad at Lancet for ruining the credibility of some of the institutions that we used to trust. Because the government is one thing. You always take what the government says with a grain of salt if you're actually a real reporter or actually follow the news carefully, right? That doesn't mean the government's lying about everything, and it also doesn't mean the government's telling the truth about everything. The conspiracy theorists say government lies 100% of the time. Mainstream media says the government tells the truth 100% of the time. That's preposterous, right? But scientists actually generally do tell the truth, right? And so do doctors, etc. That's why this one hurts so much.
But also, let me just note that, yes, when we think of the government, I think oftentimes we think about elected politicians, Democrats, Republicans, or what have you. But the government also includes organizations like the CDC, right? And when the CDC and Anthony Fauci start the pandemic communication and messaging off with, don't wear masks, it's actually counterproductive, intentionally lying to the American people because they know there's a mask shortage and they don't want ordinary Americans to go out and buy masks so nurses and doctors have access to them. That leads to people losing trust in these institutions. It's a problem. It would have been far better for Anthony Fauci to come out and just simply say, listen, we have a broken system where we rely on and exploit cheap labor in other countries. And since we can't rely on that, supply chain right now, we have a shortage of masks, and we need to make sure that doctors and nurses have access to them. Please don't buy the masks. You stay home, shelter in place, you'll be safe. He didn't do that though. They lied and said that masks are counterproductive. And that kind of messaging, again, leads to this environment and climate of distrust.
Yeah, and look, both on Fauci and Trump, let's do nuance there. First, when the heart of what Fauci said throughout the crisis, which is wear the mask, get tested, and we need the PPE, and then of course get vaccinated. We're all true, right? But we called him out immediately on the thing that wasn't true, that you didn't need masks in the beginning, as Anna just pointed out. It's possible to say Fauci got one thing wrong and other things right. Like, you don't have to fall into a camp of either I despise Fauci and he should be arrested, or Fauci's a saint and never did anything wrong. And I'll call him out again. The other day, he just said yesterday, basically, if you're criticizing Anthony Fauci and he uses his name in the third person, you're criticizing science. No, that's not true. You're not infallible. Right. You're not the only scientist in the world. So you can see where Fauci is right and you can see where Fauci is wrong. Use your own judgment. And on Trump, last thing, he didn't get it right. He didn't go talk to that scientist. He didn't go talk to the other scientists. He didn't talk to any scientist, right? He's just like, I don't know, I don't like it. I think it might have come from China. A broken clock is right twice a day, right? And so if he showed that he had actually consulted the scientist, then I would say, oh, well, okay, no problem. Even though I don't like Trump, I've given him credit on other things, right? And I'd give him, he didn't consult any scientists. You think scientists told him to inject bleach into your lungs? Okay, no. And he wasn't right on 90% of what he said about coronavirus.
Exactly, which is why it was so easy to dismiss the lab leak story. But now, luckily Biden is calling for an investigation. We'll see if we get down to the bottom of what the origin of the virus is, and we'll go from there. But I think at the end of the day, the key takeaway from this story and this whole debacle is the very institutions that have already lost trust among the American people are not making the situation better for themselves. We're continuing to lose trust. So, all right, I'm gonna do one more story before we go to our second hour break. So let's do it. A prominent anti-vaxxer testified in the Ohio State House to raise her concerns about an alleged side effect of the coronavirus vaccine that you may not know about. Watch.
What is it that's actually being transmitted that's causing all of these things? Is it a combination of the protein, which now we're finding has a metal attached to it? I'm sure you've seen the pictures all over the internet of people who've had these shots and now they're magnetized. They can put a key on their forehead, it sticks. They can put spoons and forks all over them and they can stick, because now we think that there's a metal piece to that.
That was Sherry Tenpenny. She's an osteopath and she believes genuinely that taking the coronavirus vaccine magnetizes you. And there was another person who actually stood up and testified the same thing, and in fact wanted to demonstrate how accurate this conspiracy theory really is. Let's take a look at that.
We were talking about Dr. Tenpenny's testimony about magnetic vaccine crystals. So this is what I found out. So I have a key and a bobby pin here. Explain to me why the key sticks to me. It sticks to my neck too. I got this. Yeah, so if somebody can explain this, that would be great.
Listen, obviously we're gonna have the substantive discussion about this in just a moment, but my favorite part of that video, other than the fact that her demonstration failed miserably, were the people behind her who were making wonderful facial expressions. So we have two videos to share quickly. Let's take a look at the first one.
Explain to me why the key sticks to me. It sticks to my neck too. I got this. Yeah, so if somebody can explain this, that would be great. Any questions?
But she wasn't the only one who had that reaction. One more video for you all. Let's take a look.
Explain to me why the key sticks to me. It sticks to my neck too. I got this. Yeah, so if somebody can explain this, that would be great. Any questions?
But it didn't stick. It didn't stick. She did the demonstration. It didn't stick. It didn't stick, and she said, can someone explain this to me? It didn't stick.
Yeah, we can explain it to you. Your theory is wrong. There, I just explained it. No, that first woman wins the internet, okay? Where she was like, okay. Look, we're gonna do the experiment too, because the first expert said that she saw it on the internet, so it must be true.
It must be true.
And I swear I haven't done this before. I'm fully vaccinated, so let's try it, okay? So I've got the keys here, and let's see if this works here. Well, we just disproved it. Okay, because you saw it on the internet, so it must be true. Okay. No, look, guys. There's the funny part of this. Does the vaccine make you Magneto? No. Okay, it doesn't make you any of the X-Men. It doesn't make you. You don't magically go to the Marvel comic universe. None of those things happen. The 5G is not a plan by Bill Gates to kidnap children and put them into the 5G magnet and whatever the craziness you believe. But okay, so that's obvious, right? But the two things that flow from it are devastating. One is, it's not obvious to a lot of people, and they live with us, right? So a lot of folks look at that and think, yeah, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Yep, yeah, I bet you. And think about it. You know that everyone who believes that tried it. They tried to put a fork on their head. They tried the key thing I just tried, and it didn't work. But they still believed it.
What do we do? What do we do? She did the demonstration in real time, and still asked, "Can someone explain this to me?" Yeah, I'll explain that the key did not stick to the side of your neck. You should know that, but okay. So your theory is null and void. It's nonsense. No, but Jake, like, what are we gonna do? And that's the other thing. So to Miss Tenpenny, she says it's all over the internet. No, it's all over your Facebook feed.
Yes.
Because you clicked on one conspiracy theory story, and Facebook, with its algorithm, serves you up more and more and more of that conspiracy theory. So she logs into Facebook and she's like, everyone's seeing this, right? Everyone is seeing the exact same feed I'm seeing that's like littered with insane conspiracy theories about the coronavirus pandemic. No, not everyone sees it. And I think it is a problem with how these algorithms on these social media platforms work. They keep people in these ideological bubbles. And at first I thought, all right, well, it keeps you in this tribal mentality in regard to your political affiliation, right? If you're a Democrat and you're clicking on things that are friendly toward Democrats, you're gonna be stuck in that ideological bubble. But no, it's far more nefarious than that. If you're clicking on Alex Jones content, then yeah, you're gonna be radicalized into all sorts of conspiracy theories or believing all sorts of conspiracy theories, because that's what the social media platforms serve you up through their algorithms over and over and over again.
Yeah, so look, there's the innocent part of this, where like my dad, first time he went on Facebook, and I told this in one of the bonus episodes for the members, a while back when it first happened, he goes on Facebook and he starts clicking on Turkish news because he's Turkish and he's curious about that. And then he calls me one day and he says, America all of a sudden very interested in Turkish news. Because he thought what he sees on Facebook is what everybody sees on Facebook. So he thought, oh my God, America's gone crazy with their need for Turkish news, right? So, but it's funny now, and it's funny if you know it, but to this day, a lot of people don't know that it's just serving you what you seem interested in, right? Not what everybody's seeing. But more importantly is the second part, which is people are used to thinking that if you see it in print or you see it as a video, that it must be true. Now, I don't want to go back to the bad old days where the mainstream media were the gatekeepers and they had their own set of lies, etc., right? And their own assumptions and their own things that supported basically multinational corporations, right? I like that there are no gatekeepers on the internet, but, and we are largely online, so I don't want you to disbelieve everything you see online, obviously, right? But you've got to use your judgment and you've got to look at the source. So no, not everything you see online is true. There's nonsense, wall-to-wall nonsense online. So please, for God's sake, use human judgment. And so no, and by the way, why don't you just do the experiment? Okay, let's say you didn't get vaccinated because you were worried that you were gonna have magnets stick to you and the traffic poles are gonna bend in your direction and all that stuff, right? And you probably know at least one person who's been vaccinated, ask their permission and go, hey, brother, I heard that you were magnetic. Can I just try it for a second? And then you'll see they're not magnetic. It's insane. It's not true. So, and look, you should have known that not everything you see is true, because we already have Fox News and we've had it a long time. So please break out of your bubbles, check the source, and make sure that it's from someone credible.
All right, that does it for our first hour. We're gonna take a short break, and when we come back, we have one of my favorite stories of the day, conservatives having an epiphany about how rigged our housing market is, and then thinking they're the first ones to discover that. Lots of fun. Don't miss it. And then later in the show, are we gonna have any fun today other than that?
Yeah, I love that nun who's got the gambling habit.
Yes, a nun with a bad habit, yes.
Oh, zinger! That's later in the program.
All right, stick around.
No, it's about more than just making glasses. We're talking about the right to see. Did you know that almost 1 billion people worldwide lack the access to vision correction like glasses? Billion with a B. Wow, that's 15% of the world. This is a real problem. Warby Parker thinks so too. That's why for every pair of glasses sold, they give a pair away to someone in need. Over 5 million pairs and counting so far. Yeah, that's great and all, but there's still a corporation. Is this just another PR distraction for questionable environmental practices? Climate change is what we still need to focus on. That's a great point, but actually Warby Parker is the only carbon neutral eyewear brand in the world.
I really think you're burying the lead here.
Oh, really? And what is that?
These glasses look amazing.
You do look really good.
Stop. You look good.
I don't think it can be overstated. Turn to the left. Other companies make me feel understated.
What is happening here? You guys, we gotta go to break.
Hi, I'm John, and I'm new to TikTok, but about 3 years ago, I started my daily political news show, The Damage Report, because I noticed this trend where every morning I was waking up to this tsunami of news that was just generally dreadful and horrifying and shocking, and I thought that if I could spend my time helping people to navigate this, serving as a bit of a life raft, pointing out which news is important and why, there are worse ways to spend your day. We're not an average news show, and we don't want our TikTok presence to be average either, so feel free to let us know what you'd like us to do on the platform, and maybe give us a follow at The Damage Report.
All right, Amazon Prime members, here's how you can subscribe for free on Twitch. Start by linking your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, and then click that little subscribe or resubscribe button below the stream on Twitch. Scroll down and select the subscribe free with Prime button, and then you're finished. Close out immediately and share your little subscription alert with the chat. Send a cute message along with it and bathe in the sweet, twitchy Bezos-funded love. Hashtag Bezos Bucks.
Hey everyone, Matteo Scarapore here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. Darren's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this man, who's real suave and good looking, comes in and asks Darren to give him his regular. But for some reason, Darren says no. This man named Rhett Daniels, who's the CEO of a startup called Someone, located on the 36th floor of the same building, is impressed. And he invites Darren upstairs, and then he extends an offer to join his elite sales team. Darren reluctantly joins, and he soon realizes that he's not the only black salesperson there. He's the only black person in the entire company. So he goes through hell and back in order to make it to the top. And once there, he has status, money, power, but he says, you know what? I don't like being the token black guy. So he hatches a plan to help other people of color infiltrate America's tech startup sales teams, redefining what it means to be a minority in the workplace. This book, definitely, if you couldn't tell, touches on many things that are relevant to this moment that we're all living in right now. But it's also connected to the many moments in history that have come before today. I hope that you read it. I hope that you enjoy it. And if you want to order a copy, go to shoptyt.com. Thank you, be well, and happy 2021.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Listen, I asked you guys to sign up. You guys are amazing. Here we go. You ready? YouTube members, hit the join button below. Clarissa Burdett, Gabby Mathis, Christopher Mailpors, Romo Dot, Richard Ching, Jason S, Eldermind, Pulse, hashtag 2031, John Weber, Dave Levison, Tim Cavalli. You guys are the best. You make Young Turks possible. Let's all get together and bring positive change in the world. We can do it. Speaking of which, let's go to Positive Change, Casper.
All right, so conservatives have had a housing market epiphany. They have realized that the housing market is rigged against ordinary working Americans. And what I love about this is that they've just discovered it. And since they've just discovered it, they think that they're the geniuses, and the left is completely oblivious about it, even though we've been discussing it for quite some time now. I begin with the Twitter thread in question, which embeds an article that we've talked about on this show, I think about 2 months ago. Anyway, so thread. BlackRock is buying every single family house they can find, paying 20 to 50% above asking price and outbidding normal home buyers. Why are corporations, pension funds, and property investment groups buying up all these homes?
Yeah, it actually was in April. We covered it then. Anna was on this story well before that. And she was sending me articles for months about this story and how outrageous it is. We've told you before why it's outrageous, and it involves both corporations blocking your ability to buy homes, driving up prices, locking you in as renters forever. But it also involves corruption because they basically give campaign contributions to politicians so they could do their crony capitalism.
Right.
Now they discover it months later, and wait till you see the twist.
So JD Vance writes that BlackRock is pursuing an investment strategy that will make it harder for young Americans to own homes. The left will ignore this because BlackRock has committed to racial audits and other diversity BS. So he's arguing that the left is willing to kind of brush aside or turn the other cheek when it comes to corruption or really bad crony capitalism, as long as the corporations in question are engaging in identity politics. Except, look, here's the thing. There is this habit of conflating corporate Democrats with leftists or the left, right?
Yes.
The left has been on it, but if you're criticizing corporate Democrats, I actually do agree with the criticism, because the housing market really became rigged against ordinary Americans under the Obama administration as the Federal Reserve was using this strategy of qualitative easing, right? That's where the Federal Reserve wants to provide liquidity to banks and corporations. And so they offer incredibly cheap loans to these companies, right? So that has to do with the interest rates being insanely low. Private equity firms can borrow on the cheap, as you know, and then they take that money and they just buy up all this residential property, knowing that they can corner the market and be the top landlords, right? And you have no option but to rent from them eventually once they corner the market. That's what the whole strategy is.
And that way they get to build equity in the house and you don't, and that actually hurts the wealth of American families more than any single thing you can imagine. So now, this is how it breaks down. On the political spectrum, we have the left who hates this and who's been pointing it out from the minute that it began. And it's a runaway capitalism, it's crony capitalism filled with corruption because of the campaign contributions, etc. It's the exact thing that we stand against. Then you have the corporate wing of the Democratic Party who love it. And I agree with Anna, there's one thing JD Vance is right about, which is that the corporate Democrats use identity politics as a shield. Okay, yeah, BlackRock, go steal everybody's houses, right? And then pretend to do a racial audit, whatever that means. And so, oh no, and when the left criticizes, because before this, the right wing never criticized those corporations, never, right? So they would use their identity politics, ironically, against the left. So we would say, hey, wait a minute, Janet Yellen is helping to support this, and the corporate Democrats would scream, sexist! Can you believe they've criticized Janet Yellen because she's a woman?
No, perfect example was when Politico had published a story about Janet Yellen collecting millions and millions of dollars, giving Wall Street speeches 2 years prior to being nominated as the Treasury Secretary. That's relevant information for the American people to know, especially if she's been tapped to serve as the head of the Treasury Department. But the critique or the criticism coming from corporate Democrats was that it was sexist to ever talk about the earning power of a woman. No, it's not about her earning power. It's about how she made that money and how that could corrupt her in the position she's been tapped for.
And of course it applies to Larry Summers, it applies to Tim Geithner, it applies to all these other men in the Democratic and Republican parties too. Now, and by the way, you know who patient zero on this is Hillary Clinton. So she got tons of campaign contributions from the banks and got direct checks from the banks for doing the same thing as Janet Yellen, going and giving speeches there. And when progressives criticized her for that, because she actually changed her vote on the bankruptcy bill and put tons of bankruptcy and loans and debts on you that you can't get rid of, so that she could please her banker donors. They said sexist, how could you, right? So there is that identity politics, but it is not played by the left, it's played by corporate Democrats, okay? Then you go to corporate Republicans, which is 99% of the politicians in the Republican Party. They are 100% in for the banks. And what they did, remember the 2008 bailout situation. The banks crashed the economy. What did the Republican politicians do? We got to give them trillions of dollars, okay? And then everybody's super mad. They start a Tea Party, a grassroots movement on the right, and they go, oh my God, I can't believe you bailed out all the banks. The politicians on the right, they gather up all those people and say, now go fight against Obamacare. Make sure you don't get health care for you or your family. But wait a minute, this started about the banks. Yet they didn't have a single protest at the banks.
They were also co-opted by the Koch brothers at the time.
100%,
Yeah.
and by the financial industry, et cetera. So Republican politicians have always been pro-bank, pro-corporations, the worst of the crony capitalists. At least it's only 50 to 80% of the Democratic Party. It's 99% of the Republican Party. And obviously, as you can tell here, we're calling out both sides. Now, when you get to the end of the political spectrum and you have the right-wing grassroots, well, that's a mess. You know,
Well, yeah.
So there's one upside, which is they hate corruption, okay? So I give them credit for that all the time. But the rest of it is just a hodgepodge of nonsense. They're like, banks are terrible and they're awesome. If the libs don't like the banks, then I'm gonna own the libs by giving all my money to the banks and make sure I don't have any wealth in my family. Because it's primarily driven by owning the libs. It's driven by fear and hatred and loathing, et cetera, right? But if you stick with your core principle of hating corruption, hating crony capitalism, we could actually work together to fight the corporate goons in both parties.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about goons, you should think about people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, because not only is she a goon, she also has no idea what's going on or how anything works, how the system works, doesn't even know how various economic systems work. So her response to this was socialism. All the people excited over the fantasies of socialism that they consume from social media experts and members of Congress don't understand that there will be very few that own and control everything, and the rest of the population will be poor and under control. Except that's not how this works. If you decommodify the housing market, which by the way would never happen in this country, ever. But if you treat housing as a human right as opposed to a capitalistic commodity, then people would have homes to live under, because it's not thought of as a method of earning profit or making revenue, right? That's what the housing market is right now. That's the reason why you have private equity firms snatching up all of these single family homes, apartments, whatever they can. You even have, by the way, Blackstone. I just did a story on this for Jacobin Show Weekends. Blackstone is even buying up extended stay hotel chains because people have been priced out of the housing market, both when it comes to buying homes and also renting. And so they have no choice but to pay week to week in these extended stay hotels. And Blackstone's like, we want to corner that market too. We want to be their landlords too. They're buying up those hotel chains. They're also buying up literal trailer parks. They want to be this country's top landlord. They want to control that market wholeheartedly. They want a monopoly, and they're doing it right now, right before our very eyes.
And by the way, they're not just landlords, slumlords, because once they buy the house and you're renting it and you need something fixed, they're in New York. They're not going to come and fix your house. They're leaving people for months and years with a faulty house. And what are you going to do? They got an army of lawyers, and they own most of the politicians. There's nothing you could do. I mean, remember all those fake, phony politicians, both Republicans and Democrats, that told you home ownership is the most important thing. That's what builds wealth in this country. That's true. And now they turn around and go, no, we let BlackRock and Blackstone buy all the houses, and then you don't get to build any wealth for your family ever. And it doesn't matter if you're white, black, it doesn't matter. We're screwing all Americans for our corporate agenda. But look, even though it's super obvious, I just want to say one last thing about her claim of socialism. I drive some on the left crazy, but I still call myself a capitalist, right? But I know what socialism and capitalism is. And this ain't socialism. You'd have to be nuts to think this is socialism, where you help the top banks and financial companies in the world rip everybody off. That is the exact opposite of socialism. That doesn't make any sense at all. It's not even trying to make sense, right? And she might literally be the dumbest person, not in Congress, in America. Or she's a useful idiot for the banks, and she's like, oh yeah, slip me some money. I like it. You know, it's all grift anyway, right?
She just. Yeah, I mean, if she knows what's going on, I do think that money influences her. But I think in this particular case, she's just regurgitating what she's heard on Fox News, right? Fox News slaps the socialism label onto everything they dislike. And so she sees something she thinks is bad, and she's like, this must be socialism. That's the extent of her thought process on analyzing different systems of government, different economic systems, and what have you.
No, it's just profoundly unintelligent. She probably thinks Hugo Chavez fixed the system.
Totally, yeah.
So, but lastly, if you're in the right wing, okay, well then I got good news for you. We can work together. Now, if you want to prove how non-socialist you are, let's regulate those companies so they're not allowed to rip you off. By the way, you agree with regulation when it comes to cops, right? What is all crime? It's regulation. You are not allowed to rob a bank. You are not allowed to hit that guy in the face. That is a regulation. You could also do that with the banks. You're not allowed to hit my family in the face by buying all the homes and making me a permanent renter. I need the government to protect me when it comes to police and safety, fire department, etc. But also this. So let's go and limit these financial institutions to protect American citizens. Do you want to work on that together? Now, a lot of you in the right wing might go, maybe I'll look into that because I hate the corruption. But people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are not at all honest, will go, no, I will make sure there's no regulation of the top banks that are doing this. Okay, well then shut up about socialism because you're the heart of the problem. You're the one letting them get away with it in the first place.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, some interesting statistics on the crime spike that's becoming more and more of a story on the show. So we'll talk about what's causing it, how much crime has spiked in the country, and then later in the show, we'll discuss that nun who felt the need to steal money from her own church in order to fund her gambling habit. Come right back.
Guys, I forgot to tell you about something. You saw that funny ad. It looks like it's an ad for Warby Parker, but it's actually about aspiration. Because Aspiration works with the Conscious Coalition, and Warby Parker's part of that. And Aspiration is giving away $500 gift cards to places like Warby Parker. If you go to tyt.com/win. I can't win it, but I have an Aspiration card and I'm swiping like crazy because I got it in my head, right? There's a lot of ways you can do it. You can sign up for Aspiration, you can upgrade your account, and you could swipe 10 times in the contest period to qualify for the $500 gift card. But there's one other fun part of that. So I wore 5 different glasses in that Warby Parker /Aspiration ad, and we're asking you to vote on which one looked the best, okay? So tyt.com/polls, that's good enough. You'll see all of our polls there, but if you want to be specific, tyt.com/polls/aspiration. Who wore it better? Seriously, vote on it, and the top 1 or maybe even 2, they're saying I'm gonna wear on the show. I sent them back, I don't know. And not because they were bad, I actually loved a couple of them. But because I didn't know I could keep them. But if you guys vote for them, they might actually give me a pair free, which I would love. Okay, so everybody's a winner. Go vote, I'm curious what you guys thought. But most importantly, go to tyt.com/win so that you could actually win them. $500 gift card ain't nothing to sneeze at, okay? So sign up for Aspiration. They're awesome. They're progressive. I told you they said for their own employees, they came up with a new rule just like a week ago: $25 an hour. Nobody's getting paid less than $25 an hour. That's unbelievably progressive and wonderful, okay? All right, now, speaking of wonderful, people who just joined, Kezoman1, Bex X, Matthew Taylor, Nicole Smith, all hit the join button below. Keep it going, brothers and sisters. And somebody had a question about membership because I told you we don't have the $1.99 level anymore on YouTube, but we are subsidizing some $1.99 level, but with actual membership benefits on our website, tyt.com/join to go there. But Raul Zarate asked, does the subsidizing go into effect now so I can upgrade? Yes. So if you upgrade to $25, for example, on our website, one other person gets subsidized at $1.99 because if they can't afford it, we want to give some outlet for them to be able to watch the bonus episode, etc. At $100, you subsidize 10 people. So I know that's a ton, right? That's $100 a month. You could also do the annual version. You can check it all out. You can go to tyt.com/join or change. Either way, love it. And then I'm gonna try real quick here. I'm gonna run out of time. No, I can't. All right, Matt. Thank you for the YouTube super chat. I'm gonna read it in the next break because you make a really important point. I'm out of time. Love you guys. We'll be right back. Back on TYT Jenkinana with you guys. I'm gonna read more Twitch comments in the next break. I love you guys on Twitch. But we have a hype train going there, so get all aboard, okay? Woo, woo. Should I do that every time we have a hype train? Everybody votes no, / in the studio. I know you guys vote yes. But tell me what to put. Gave another 1,234 bits today. You're the best, brother. You know what to put. And then the Real Blue Tech gifted 5 subs and gave 1,500 bits. Those bits add up. All of that makes a difference. Thank you guys. All right, Anna.
You may have noticed crime spiking in your neighborhood, maybe throughout the entire country. And if you've noticed it, it is absolutely true. There has been a crime spike, certainly during the coronavirus pandemic, and unfortunately that trend is continuing. Now, it's important to know about this and to address it because if the left pretends like it doesn't exist, it's very certain that we're going to go back to the terrible tough on crime policing that we experienced in the 1990s, something that we're trying to reform today. But there needs to be a solution, an alternative to that. First, let's talk a little bit about what the statistics show. According to, honestly, an excellent report by Rachel Cohen over at the Daily Beast, one analysis from the Council on Criminal Justice found that a 30% increase has happened in homicides across 34 US cities compared to 2019. And Jeff Asher, an independent crime analyst, found murder up 37% across 57 localities. Now there's been more studies into this, and there's an analysis of gun violence data from Everytown. That's a gun control advocacy group. And they suggest that 2020 had the highest rate of gun deaths in the last 20 years. Now, oftentimes when you hear about this, and you hear about crime spikes throughout the country, conservatives argue that it's mostly in Democrat-run municipalities or Democrat-run states, but that's actually not true. Now, in rural parts of the country, it's actually harder to know the exact statistics because they don't collect those statistics the way big metropolitan parts of the country do. However, we do have some FBI data on that as well. Preliminary FBI data from 13,000 law enforcement agencies found cities with 25,000 people or less saw 25% increases in murder last year, and mid-sized cities had increases ranging from 24 to 31%. Final FBI data will be published in September, and we'll fill you guys in on the final numbers once we get them. But unfortunately, that trend is continuing into 2021. The first few months of 2021, for instance, have shown few signs of improvement in terms of shootings and homicides. We've covered some of those shootings on the show. So there are various factors at play here, which we'll get to in just a second. But Cenk, first reaction to the crime spike.
So I just real quick want to talk about how it's going to be used to demagogue, and it has already begun, right? So one example of that was Larry Krasner is a wonderful progressive prosecutor in Philadelphia, and he's doing actual police reform and criminal justice reform. So they took a Republican and pretended he was a Democrat because no Republican can win an election in Philadelphia, and they ran him against Krasner in the primary. We told you about that primary. And the police unions all backed, no, that's not fair. That minority police backed Krasner, but the major police unions backed the fake Democrat in the primary, and they ran tons of ads against Krasner. It said, oh, he caused the crime spike. As you can see here, no, it's all across the country. It has nothing to do with Philadelphia. And so if you see that demagoguing in your own city, understand what it is, and it's a lie. It's being used against progressives everywhere, and they're pretending it's because we're looking for criminal justice reform, when most of those cities have done no criminal justice reform at all, no police reform at all, right? By the way, if you're wondering, Krasner won by 30 points. So get that stuff out of here.
Now, one of the factors at play, of course, has to do with guns. In fact, during the 2020 year, there was really an explosion of gun purchases. So FBI data, for instance, suggests nearly 40 million guns were sold last year, a 40% increase from 2019. New data from Northeastern University and the Harvard Injury Control Research Center found roughly 20% of those who bought guns last year were actually first-time gun owners. So it just shows you how more and more people are deciding to buy guns and arm themselves. 39% of American households at this point now own guns, up from 32% 5 years earlier. So there have been multiple studies to show that the existence of guns means that you're going to experience an increase of gun violence, right? Like more guns means more gun violence. And unfortunately, there's nothing being done either on a state level, a national level in addressing that issue. So we're seeing more homicides or more gun violence because more people have purchased guns, more people have access to them. The other reason, by the way, is the coronavirus lockdowns. As Rachel Cohen writes, the pandemic weakened community institutions that experts say typically help deter crime. Patrick Sharkey, a sociologist and criminologist at Princeton, has said the corresponding disconnection from places like schools and pools and recreation centers all help increase the conditions that may lead to violent behavior. And I actually think that's an interesting point that doesn't get discussed enough. You know, not having these places to go where you can be social, where you can have connections with others, really takes away a method of deterring crime.
Yeah, so now when you look at the real reason, which is the explosion of guns, and now there are more guns than people in America by a lot. If you just pause to think about how crazy that is, it's over 300 million guns in this country. We're just swimming in an ocean of guns. And so how do you know we're right about guns and the other guys aren't? Well, I just told you, for example, well, they didn't do police reform in most of those cities and crime went up anyway, right? So that's one indication. Another indication is suicides. Suicides have also gone up. Why? Because people are committing suicide with guns and they are much more effective with guns. So the overwhelming majority of suicides that people try without a gun do not succeed, and those people go on to lead wonderful lives, okay? At least they're alive, right? They do not succeed in killing themselves. The overwhelming majority of suicide attempts with guns do work, unfortunately. And so when you see this suicide spike and the crime rate with guns spike, you know it's the guns. And that's what's happened here. It's every study before we all bought even more guns than the insane amount of guns we already had 5 years ago showed you that wherever there's more guns, there's more gun violence and more suicides. And so unsurprisingly, with a massive surge of gun buying in the last 5 years, and partly because of Fox News propaganda, conservative propaganda, Republican propaganda, and mainly gun manufacturer propaganda that filtered into all of those outlets through the NRA, you wind up having a spike in crime because in the old days, if you were mad at one another, you might push each other, you might even punch each other. I remember when I was a kid, yeah, there were a lot of fights, but we didn't all own guns, right? If somebody had a knife, that was a big deal, right? Now, the minute anybody's mad at anybody, to pull out a gun and kill them.
2 people in California just got arrested after a road rage incident led the driver to take out his gun and shoot into the car that he was feeling road rage against, and a 6-year-old child got shot and killed. as a result. Luckily, they found the two in the car that opened fire and they're arrested now. But if you don't have that gun, your road rage incident just results in you screaming at the top of your lungs behind the steering wheel and then getting over it. But if you have a gun with you, the likelihood of you using that gun in a road rage incident obviously increases just by the very existence of that gun in your vehicle as you're upset and angry.
Look, there's countless stories of kids finding a gun in the home because you think you do gun safety right, and maybe a lot of you do, but a ton of people don't. And then the kid kills himself, it kills the parent, kills the sister, kills the brother, on and on. We just stopped covering because it was so depressing. And then we stopped covering the mass shootings because there was too many of them, right?
I mean, it would be the entire show if we covered all mass shootings.
But literally there's like a couple a day. And so it would swallow up the whole show. So now you got to kill 8, 10 people. This is total. OK Corral was only 2 people that died. And they talked about it for 100 years, the shootout at the OK Corral. Now we have a shootout at the OK Corral multiple times throughout the day because everybody's in a shootout because everybody's got guns. It's super obvious.
Now there's one final thing I want to bring up because I do think that there are progressives, I don't know if it's progressive policy, but progressives in places like California who have made terrible decisions. And so one of those terrible decisions is essentially doing away with anti-camping laws, right? Allowing people to camp out wherever they want, whenever they want. And if, like, we have a homeless problem in California. We have it all throughout the country, but it's particularly bad in California. And so the argument is, well, if there isn't public housing available for people, they should be allowed to camp out. Okay, but there's also a problem right now where there is public housing available and individuals will say, no, I don't want to take it. I don't want to follow the rules in the public housing. And so as a result, I would rather camp out. Progressive lawmakers are like, we should allow them to camp out. And you know what happens? Crime happens. Open air drug markets happen, and it's the truth. These are the facts of the matter. In fact, it was addressed in this Daily Beast article, and honestly, it was cathartic to read it because everyone denies that this is happening. So one likely explanation for 2020 gun violence that gets less airtime is the opioid crisis and the corresponding explosion of open air drug markets. Preliminary CDC data suggests more than 87,000 Americans died of drug overdoses last year, a 29% increase from 2019. Now, John Roman, who's a crime researcher with the University of Chicago, says that open air drug markets are the ultimate recipe for violence. You have dealers fighting over customers, customers fighting with dealers, wholesale networks on top of that, competing for market share, new beefs, turf wars, gangs. And we see it in front of us with our very eyes. And like this idea of, no, just let people do whatever they want. If they want to camp outdoors, even after they've been, offered public housing, that should be okay. No, I don't agree with that. I think that's an awful policy.
And of course, let's not overlook the Oxy problem, because we had drug problems in America before, of course, but Oxy has kicked it into a different level. I mean, what was that, 89,000 deaths related to that in a year? And it's not just from the overdoses, it's also from the violence that comes from dealing Oxy, etc. And by the way, who brought you the Oxy crisis? Multinational corporations, and then they bribed the politicians. Gave campaign contributions to both Republicans and Democrats to let them sling that heroin, that legalized heroin. They used the legalized bribery to sell legalized heroin. And then we're surprised to find out that there's more crime as well as the overdoses in America.
Exactly.
So all of that is a toxic stew that led to the extra crime.
All right, well, unfortunately, predictive policing is here. This is the exact tough on crime nonsense that we need to fight back against. So when we come back from the break, I'll give you the details on that story and more. Stick around.
back during the social break here. Coming up later tonight, deep dive on Twitch. It's on at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, so it'll be right after the bonus episode here. Members get everything, so hit that join button below or tyt.com/join. And tonight it's deep dive, obviously with Jordan Newell. So check that out at twitch.tv/tyt. You'll be able to watch the show live, everybody can. But if you can sign up for membership, you can get most of our shows afterwards as well. Speaking of membership, Sile34 just joined. And before I go to more Twitch comments, I want to read one that I promised you guys earlier. Matt Cockrell wrote in on YouTube Super Chat saying, grifters are hijacking the progressive conversation about Biden's failings to promote realignment theory. The idea that post-Trump, the real populist politicians are now MAGA, like Hawley. He actually said maggots. But
that's, by the way, yes, you're right. That's absolutely true. And I'm happy that some people are privy to it.
100%. Just to let him finish, he said, this is obviously absurd. All GOP politicians oppose $15 an hour and any tax increase. Matt, thank you. Thank you for being rational and figuring that out. Unfortunately, some on the extreme left, I don't know what you want to call them, loony left, dumb left, whatever you want to call them, right? They're not even left. Most of them are not left. They're mainly supported by Patreon, etc., from the right wing, right? But yes, they have convinced, unfortunately, and I don't even like calling them any of those names, but they get under my skin and sometimes I can't help it, right? And some of them mean well and meant well, but they've become seduced by the idea that the right wing actually has their best interest in mind. That is not remotely true. Realignment my ass. Now that, by the way, but Matt and all of you, don't forget, don't lose, we're not gonna do black and white either. If some of those in the right wing actually wanted to join us and wanted to pass $15 minimum wage, great, I will take their vote in a second, right? And you say, well, that's impossible. On that issue, probably. But on the issue of war, no, they actually did come and try to block Trump on war. Even Matt Gaetz did. And I'm gonna take yes for an answer. It doesn't mean I trust and believe in Louis Gohmert and Ted Cruz and stuff. But what is now happening is not at all realignment on any of those issues. And if it happens, I'd be thrilled to tell you about it. All right, back to Twitch. Tell me what to put. Game 1,506 bits now. I love the randomness of the numbers. Daisy Dragon gifted 2 subs and 500 bits. AJ Duenas gifted 6 subs. The Real Blue Tech gifted 5 subs. You guys are amazing every time. 001111 wrote in 10 months of Bezos bucks with many more on the way. Love you, TYT, and gifted a sub. Dave Schmidt, Bookworm Dragon, Shifty, Uncle Bobby signed up. The others gifted subs. You have so much more. I wish I could read them all. Love you. All right, so let's go to the next story. That was an awkward intro.
Yes, all right, predictive policing, it's here. A Florida teenager has been incessantly harassed by local police after they've decided to start using this predictive policing method in order to essentially accuse people of committing crimes before they've even committed them. It's insane, and it's insane that it's being used already without any real national backlash. So this all started after an aerospace process auditor by the name of Robert Jones moved him and his family to Florida, and he thought this is a great neighborhood. It's a nice neighborhood. We're going to be happy here. But almost immediately, his child started getting harassed by the cops. So this is in Pasco County, Florida specifically. Officers said that they had heard about Robert Jones's then 16-year-old son Bobby's school delinquency from colleagues in Pinellas County, where the family previously lived, and wanted to make sure he understood that the Pasco Sheriff's Office did things a little differently, Jones recalled. So what does that mean, to do things differently? Well, they collect data on people and then try to predict whether or not the individuals they're collecting data on are gonna commit crimes. So Bobby had been expelled from his last school for smoking weed and also getting into a fight with another student. So that was the point where his family decided, okay, we need to move, we need a fresh start. Now, the officers had that information and they asked to talk to Jones's kid, and within seconds, they were running rampant through the house. They started like looking through the house to try to see if there was any evidence of any other crimes taking place. Now, they scoured the house and found empty zip clothes bags in his son's room that later tested positive for traces of marijuana. Bobby was arrested and spent 3 weeks in juvenile detention before his trial, where the judge dismissed the charges due to the lack of measurable marijuana. He had been at his new school for just over a week when this happened. Now, soon after Bobby's arrest, Jones discovered that his son had been targeted by the sheriff's department with this intelligence-led policing program. Cops had used records of Bobby's previous interactions with law enforcement to predict that he would be a problem in the county. After Bobby was released, a months-long ordeal followed, which Jones described as a horror story of police showing up at the family's home, sometimes multiple times a day or in the middle of the night, to inquire about Bobby or ask to enter the home. Anytime there was a crime in the neighborhood, such as a burglary, for instance, Bobby was a suspect.
Yeah. Okay, so this is one of the most outrageous things, and now it's spreading like a cancer throughout the country. But this case is amazing. So I'm gonna read you one thing here. They say, no, this is not pre-crime, okay? This is intelligence-led policing. First of all, that sounds like pre-crime. They say, no, this is for, quote, at-risk youth who are destined to a life of crime. That's pre-crime. You're saying they're not destined to a life of crime. And what was Bobby's original problem in the previous county that they found out about through their intelligence, right? By the way, Bobby's not a terrorist. You don't have to do intelligence on him. He's 16 years old at the time, right? He smoked weed apparently.
And he got into a fight with another student.
Okay, hold on. Weed? How many millions of kids have smoked weed in this country? Weed. That's what puts you on a list of pre-criminals. Okay, and got into a fight. I would have been the biggest pre-criminal when I was a kid. I got into so many fights, and so they would have busted down our door. Now, let's look at who's lying, who's telling the truth, right? So in the old days, mainstream media told you the police are always telling the truth. Whoever they've targeted is always lying, right? Now we know the counter rule is probably much more likely to be true. So in this case, the dad says, they come and tell me, oh, look, you guys just moved in, we're here to help. And so we know that Bobby had some issues in the last town. And by the way, it turns out this family had moved because they wanted a fresh start. So the dad thinks, oh, this is good, okay? And they're gonna do a scared straight talk to Bobby and the kids, right? So he lets them in the house. And then they start ransacking his house. He's like, wait, what are you guys doing? Why are you destroying the house? They're like, no, you just gave us permission. He's like, I didn't give you permission to rifle through the house. I didn't give you permission to come and arrest my son. You completely lied and said that you were gonna give him a talk about, hey, this is a great place and you shouldn't do X, Y, or Z. So shocking, it turns out the cops are liars. Of course, right? And so then the cops say at one point, no, we're not doing this to too many people. In this one county, 20,000 kids were put in the at-risk category.
Yeah. And you want to know how invasive their data collection process is? So they look into everything from like school records. For instance, school records were used to allocate students one of 4 labels: on track, at risk, off track, or critical. All right, getting a D grade or having a parent or sibling go to prison could be enough to put a child in the at-risk category, according to Pasco's own 83-page intelligence-led policing manual.
No, guys, just think about that for a second. Did you ever get bad grades in school? They're gonna put you on a list for getting bad grades. And but look, like the police came to this house, they said multiple times throughout the day, almost every day. They would come in the middle of the night and then they'd barge into the house. This is insanity, right? Bad grades, and then the crimes of the brother will be passed on to you. We got your brother's on the list, your sister's on the list. Now you're all on the list. And then when the cops are pressed on this, they say, well, we got 20,000 that are at risk, but you heard the different categories. Just several hundred are in the place where we need to do intervention, okay? And then when you ask them what's the intervention, they say, oh, we're trying to put them on a positive path. Yeah. Does any of this sound positive to you?
Yeah, their version of a positive path is literally going into their home and like ransacking it, looking for a crime that wasn't even committed. Like, it's insane. No, but this is actually far worse than what we've experienced in our already terrible justice system. This isn't justice. This is the kind of stuff that you would expect in some sort of authoritarian government, dictatorial regime. And it just happened, and it's not even like a top news story.
Yeah, no, guys, it's begun. So like those science fiction movies where they look for proclivities in your DNA and your background, etc. It's literally begun. This is an NBC News report on it, and this is the Florida example is one, but again, it's a police manual that's being spread all across the country. They're putting kids onto all of these lists of people who might be at risk or critical of committing crime later. They're literally busting into their houses. I think they went to this house 18 times or something along those lines.
Dozens of times, yes.
Yes, and so, no, you have to fight back. And by the way, this is something that should unite us. The right wing, you should hate this. This is big government. Jackbooted thugs of the government coming in, breaking into your house when you didn't do anything wrong. And your kids, and they're going after your family, right? And the left wing, obviously you should hate this. Any reasonable person should hate this. This is literally a police state, and it has begun in America.
All right, final story for you. The story we've been teasing throughout the show today. The nun in Southern California. A nun in Southern California has been caught stealing literally hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Catholic school that she works in order to indulge in her gambling habit. Now, Sister Mary Margaret Kruper will plead guilty to swindling over $835,000 from the Catholic elementary school she ran to help pay for her gambling trips. She's 79 years old and was charged with wire fraud and money laundering for ripping off St. James Catholic School for a period of 10 years, ending in September of 2018. Now, she was in charge, unfortunately, of the school's credit union account, and it was meant to deposit the cash and checks from tuition. And the St. James Convent account, a savings account that funded the living expenses of the nuns, was basically what she was skimming money off of. As the Archdiocese conducted a financial review for the new principal, it noticed something was off in the documents. And so finally, they did this investigation. They realized, oh my gosh, the nun who's in charge of our credit union account is the one who's been skimming money from the tuition that's being paid for the school. And now her lawyers are saying, well, she's actually not a bad person. It's just that she's been suffering some mental health issues. And that's why she felt the need to steal money from this Catholic school and fund her gambling habit.
Okay, so buckle up, brace for impact. Here comes dad jokes. Okay, now it is a bad habit. Okay,
nailed it.
But I'm having none of it. Okay, that was a sister acting badly. Okay, all right. Now, my instinct is to yell, "Let her go! Let her go!" Why? What? Because I'm a hopeless gambler.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Okay, do I mean it? Of course not. She's stealing from like other nuns and kids. It's outrageous, right? I love that excuse at the end. She's having some mental health issues that she's been having for decades.
I mean, it is a defense that's used quite often in criminal cases. So
yeah, I mean, she was shredding documents, but like if a person's having mental decline issues, she's not trying to cover up evidence by shredding and burning documents and all that stuff. Okay, that's not what's happening.
Dude, it's nearly $1 million.
Yeah.
Nearly $1 million. Like that's the problem with the problem with criminals is criminals. But like If she had just been a little less greedy, she would have gotten away with it.
Oh yeah, oh sure. And look, it happens everywhere too. I remember in our school, after we left, it turns out an assistant principal who was in charge of the safe, okay, was stealing from the safe, okay. So which leads to the serious point in this story. When I was growing up, I was told that people in authority were awesome and they were to be trusted completely, right? Cops never lie. Religious figures like priests and nuns are wonderful. The government never lies. On and on and on. By the way, who told you all those lies? The mainstream media. It was the mythology of bow your head. The people in authority are the best of the best. Now I come to find out, the cops do not always tell the truth. Now every African American in the audience is going, I could have told you that, okay. And then look at what the priest did, right? Now here comes a nun with a bad habit, blah, 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 right? And so it's not, look, nuns are not, this is a one-off on nuns. There's wonderful nuns. By the way, there's wonderful priests and some wonderful cops. Yes, they exist, etc. But don't believe the hype. Okay, those positions, people in positions of power are very fallible. They're very human. They do not always tell the truth. They do not always do the right thing. And the more power you give them, the more corrupted they become. And the more they tell you, don't question them, the more likely they are to become corrupted. Because that means there's no check on their actions.
Yep.
So let's put a check on all of these people in power. That's what we're supposed to do in a democracy. Unfortunately, we haven't done very much of that. But at least they caught her. You know what her plan was. She was gonna win it back. I can tell you from personal experience, it's a very bad plan. All right, guys, we got an awesome bonus episode for all the members right now. We'll see you there. You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like. tyt.com/join and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey, hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitzing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing. I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Cenk. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, AKA Woke Bay.
Oh, hi. I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
This is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. I'll refer to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool, rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
All right, welcome to Dr. Rashad Richard Indisputable. This is going to be quite interesting. I don't know if you can handle this much truth on any day of the week. The unrest inside of the black community and communities that support them. It's because these cops are not held accountable. You have a family calling 911, and that family is expecting help, not expecting their loved one to be killed by the very people they pay to protect and serve them. Did you ever notice a cop that you work with called any black person the N-word or target people because they were black? Nope. But we disagree that somehow police officers are not also subject to the same systemic biases and racism as any other level of law enforcement.
It sounds like for everybody's need who wants to crucify the cops without looking at it.
No, crucify bad cops, brother. Bad cops.
That we don't need the government to step into our lives mandating that we should be wearing a mask.
You putting on a mask, Trey, is government intrusion. But you don't think the government telling a woman what she can or cannot do with her body is a government intrusion. Where does life begin? You want to go there? I can read it to you, bro.
You seem very well prepared. Certainly more.
Of course, why would I not be well prepared? They don't stop, I don't stop. Racism won't stop, I won't stop. Systemic bias won't stop, I won't stop. People still need health care, so I won't stop. People still need criminal justice systems reform throughout this country, so I won't stop, and you won't stop either.
Climate is changing fundamentally, extremely, and non-linearly. It's becoming worse now. It's not when the levees burst that is the problem. It's in the anticipation of that.
So I hope every human being is safe. And by human beings, I do not include multinational corporations, especially the ones that started climate change in the first place.
What we're currently doing right now in cutting emissions is clearly not enough. There will be ramifications to what Trump is doing. I don't want people to suffer, but I feel like there's gonna be a lot of suffering because we have an imbecile as our leader.
Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. We got a couple more stories for you guys, and then we'll see if we can squeeze something cutesy in.
All right, so crazy video out of Arkansas. So police in Arkansas are now facing a little bit of heat after they used what's referred to as a pit maneuver to stop a woman who took a little too long to pull over. Okay, so she was being pulled over for speeding. She was going a little over the speed limit, and she decided that it was a little too dark and she didn't want to just pull over on the side of the freeway. And since she took a little too long, this is what happened.
July 2020, Nicole Harper was driving home on the I-67 and is alleged to have been clocked for speeding by Senior Corporal Rodney Dunn, who claims that she fled. But in the video, we see an obvious decrease in speed as Harper pulls into the right lane and activates her turn signal. She claims it was to indicate she was going to exit the interstate, as the area had a reduced shoulder. Regardless of Harper's actions and indications that she would stop, Corporal Dunn initiates a pit maneuver.
The woman in the car was, or is a 38-year-old woman, Nicole Harper, who is pregnant and now is suing the police department for what they did. Now, luckily, her baby was safe. She had a healthy delivery later. She, survived clearly, but she could have died. She could have lost the pregnancy as a result of what the cop did there. Under 2 minutes, he had tried to pull her over, and all it took was her failing to pull over in less than 2 minutes for him to do that maneuver, that pit maneuver.
Yeah, so there's a couple problems here. Number one, let's just get this one out of the way. Cops said that she was dangerous, blah, blah, blah. We see the video. How many times are you gonna see cops lying through their teeth before you begin to think, maybe it's not a few bad apples? And so I'm not in the camp that I think and there is this camp that thinks people who are go to become police officers are inclined to be more authoritarian and abuse their power, etc. I think it's in the training and the culture, right? And so, which gets to the heart of this story, which is, well, we teach them all these things that are not just militaristic. Sometimes the military actually handles situations better than police do. I've talked to people who are part of military police and regular police, and some who are in both, and they say, oh no, the military is far more careful with the lives of civilians of other countries than our own police forces are careful with our lives, right? And so we give them tanks and they want to use tanks. We give them AR-15s, they want to use whatever it is that we're giving them, right? And then we teach them a pit maneuver and they're jonesing to use it. They can't wait to use it. And it's gonna be so cool, it looks cool. And it's bad guys and you're the good guy and it's like out of a movie, and then you tip them over and you got them. Who's gonna bother figuring out if it's a bad guy? She took 2 minutes. It was a little too long. And he was jonesing to do it.
She had her emergency lights on, indicating that she's acknowledging the cop.
I mean, we all saw the video.
We all saw it. We all saw it.
There's no question she was not dangerous.
They don't care about people's lives at all. And by the way, like, race isn't even an issue in this story. She's a white woman, right? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter. When you tell local police departments that they're infallible, that they could do no wrong, that there are no consequences for their actions, yeah, they're gonna go ahead and abuse people with no worries of consequences. In fact, in this case, the police, of course, are protecting their own, even though we all just saw what happened. In fact, here's what they say. This is the statement from Colonel Bill Bryan, who is, responding to calls to do something about this. He says, there's a fundamental state law none of us should never forget. All drivers are required under Arkansas law to safely pull off the roadway and stop when a police officer activates the patrol vehicle emergency lights and siren. Give her some time to do it. Just give her some time to do it. It's a woman who's driving alone in a dark highway, and she didn't feel safe pulling over on said highway until she could exit and do it safely and feel comfortable. She had her emergency lights on. She wasn't speeding at that point. She wasn't trying to evade the police officer. He didn't even give her any time. It was less than 2 minutes between the time he tried to pull her over and the time that he did the pit maneuver. Less than 2 minutes.
And you saw the shoulder. Shoulder looked narrow to me. And so I can see why she was concerned about pulling over in that shoulder.
I wouldn't know what to do in that situation,
right? Because you're on the highway. It's easier when you're on a local road. You pull over to the side. Everybody knows that, right?
Yeah.
And when she did the blinker and the emergency lights, it was super obvious she was trying to comply with the directions, right? So now, look, again, go to the heart of the issue here. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like nails. And so race compounds the problem. And by the way, class compounds the problem. But the heart of the problem is the police culture, which I'm gonna get into one more in a second, right? But then if you're poor, since you have less power, they're more likely to do it to you. If you're black or a minority, that they're more likely to do it to you, and we've seen it over and over again. But if you're white, you're not immune from it. And if you're middle class, you're not immune from it. And even in that case, we don't even know. She could have been rich. I mean, she's not driving the fanciest car in the world, right? But by the way, that is like, if she was driving a really nice car, you think he does the pit maneuver to her? No, she's driving like a Mercedes or a Volvo or something, right? I don't know. But class and race are parts of the issue, no question about it. But now let's go to the core of why police feel like they can abuse their authority in this country. So, number one, they're taught take no chances, okay? You know the old saying, better to be judged by 12 than carried out by 6. So you're never, ever gonna take a chance. Just shoot them dead, who cares? We'll sort it out later, okay? Now that's usually the situation. Here, he seems to be doing it for joy, right?
Right.
Because it was absolutely no danger. The second layer of it is thin blue line. It doesn't matter, you can do anything you want, you could be the over the top criminal as a cop, but all cops protect everyone in their own gang. But wait a minute, I thought you guys were law enforcement. So why are you protecting this guy? You have eyes. If you're a fellow police officer, if some of you are cops out there, you know what he did was wrong. So why is every cop there protecting him? Thin blue line. They're in my gang. They're in my gang.
Where are all the pro-life zealots? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Where are all the pro-life zealots? Where are they? Where are they? All the ones who support Texas banning abortions past six weeks. All the people who claim that they're pro-life because of the fact that they support these disgusting, restrictive reproductive laws. Where are you? Where are you? I mean, she could have lost the baby. I mean, I know you don't actually care about the woman herself. You just see her as a vessel for delivering the baby, which you'll then neglect after it's born. But what happened? I thought you guys cared about fetuses so much.
And pro-life people, I mean, it could have been a boy. Okay, anyways, the third leg of why the cops abuse their authority in this country systematically is because they're not held accountable. They're above the law. They win on almost every criminal case. Our mainstream media brainwashed everybody into think cops never lie. A hilarious joke. Okay, but yet a lot of people in juries still believe that, especially old school folks, right? Prosecutors don't go after them because they're local prosecutors who work with those same cops every day. But the most important part of it is qualified immunity. So you're not allowed to sue cops personally, right? When they're acting as police officers. So now, if he thought he could be sued for that, if he got the wrong person, do you think he tips her over? If he thought he could lose his house and he could lose his job and be held responsible, do you think he would have done that? My guess is he would have thought twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. But conservatives in this country say, nope, cops are above the law, qualified immunity, okay? They should never be held personally responsible for their actions. So now, by the way, progressives want to do criminal justice reform. Cori Bush has been the top fighter on this, a wonderful Justice Democrat. And she's saying, no, I'm not gonna let you do weak sauce police reform that isn't actually reform. I want qualified immunity gone, right? And a lot of great Just Democrats, progressives are fighting to get rid of qualified immunity. Because if he thought he could be sued for that, you know, I know, even if you're a cop, you all know that he would not have done that move. In fact, especially if you're a cop, you know that. Because right now you're going, I don't want qualified immunity taken away, then I would be held responsible. Yeah, that's the point.
All right, one more story for you. There has been a leak, although it hasn't been corroborated yet, that alleges that Hunter Biden, through a series of texts, had used the N-word. Now, first off, Hunter Biden has all sorts of issues. There's really no use in trying to defend him. If it is proven that these are in fact his text messages and he used the N-word, it's wrong. I'm 100% against it and no one should be defending it. With that said though, it appears that conservatives are now pretending to care about racial slurs by exploiting this for political purposes. So look, I don't really want to read the wording in his text. It was allegedly a text to his lawyer where he, you could take a look at it for yourselves. As the source reports, the messages that were leaked show Hunter Biden asking his lawyer, who is white, how much money do I owe you? Because N-word, you better not be charging me Hennessy rates. Anyway, after that, you have a bunch of right-wingers who are piling onto Hunter Biden to, again, pretend like they care about racial slurs, when in reality, they have been apologists for racial slurs, and more importantly, racism within this country. Dinesh D'Souza, when will Hunter Biden be held accountable?
Wait, are you trying to cancel him?
I know, it's kind of amazing.
Freedom of speech, freedom of speech. When I say the N-word, the Constitution says I get to say it. When Hunter Biden says it, I pretend to be outraged. I mean, I'm really outraged.
And then you have other conservatives, Sean Hannity also tried to, call him out on this, like father, like son. Joe and Hunter are caught up in racial controversies. Joe, who stood against desegregation, which is true, by the way, in terms of busing, seems to be covering his tracks, while Hunter allegedly used the N-word in several texts. And so one final thing I want to go to is Ben Shapiro's take on all of this, because Ben Shapiro, of course, is the arbiter of what is and is not acceptable language pertaining to the Black community. Let's watch.
Yeah, of course.
Here is the full story about Hunter Biden. Now, again, I will say that when it comes to the use of the N-word, there is a difference between calling a Black person an N-word with an ER at the end and in jest using the N-word that ends with an A to describe a white person. Now, the latter is also really crude and gross and stupid. It's not racist in the same way that it would be if you were just shouting the N-word at a black person, which is the height of racism, obviously, in American society. But here's
Yeah, thanks for that explanation. We appreciate it. So look, first of all, conservatives got to make up their minds. Is it freedom of speech to say the N-word and to be celebrated, or are they outraged?
No, but they don't have to make up their minds. That's the thing. Like the standard that we apply to ourselves in being consistent, being honest, that is not the standard that they apply to themselves, and they don't have to. They don't have to. Their supporters, their voters, their followers are totally fine with them being hypocrites, changing, their position on things depending on what's politically beneficial at the moment. And that's the case here. They love it. They love it. They love the lies. They love the hypocrisy. They live for it.
Yeah, and so Anna makes this point often, and I think it's a really good one. Guys, don't get distracted by this social cultural noise, right? Both from the right wing pretending to be outraged in a story like this, and corporate Democrats using it as a bludgeon against the left and sometimes against the right. Okay, so while they're playing all these games with you, all of them are letting their corporate donors rob the country blind.
100%.
Right? Sean Hannity's part of that racket. Ben Shapiro is very much part of that racket. And so is mainstream media, right? So there's only one part of this story that is actually true and relevant. Hunter Biden, like you said, we're not gonna be defending him. Why would anybody defend Hunter Biden?
Right,
Who
exactly,
cares?
yeah.
Right, like he's
the most irrelevant person on the planet. Yeah, like he's not a person in a position of power like his father is. He's got issues, all sorts of issues. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and he had addiction issues, etc. But I don't know if he's a good guy, bad guy. I don't care. He's not in charge of Middle East peace, right? Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of Donald Trump, he's like, oh, I'm gonna give him the Middle East. Actually, when we broke down all the stories by the end of the Trump presidency, you realize that Steve Mnuchin, basically the Treasury Secretary, ran domestic policy. Stephen Miller ran immigration and border issues. And Jared Kushner ran the rest of foreign policy. And so that's his son-in-law. And then let alone what he gave to his daughter, etc. Now those guys were relevant. Was Tiffany Trump relevant? Not at all. I don't want to know about Tiffany Trump. I don't care about Tiffany Trump. Barron Trump's a minor, right? But I'm not talking about minor or not. Tiffany Trump's an adult, obviously daughter of Donald Trump, but had no role in policy whatsoever. So leave Tiffany alone. She's got nothing to do with this. I don't know if she's a good person or a bad person, and I don't care. Same thing for Hunter Biden. Joe Biden didn't come into office and be like, okay, now Hunter Biden in charge of all domestic policy or foreign policy. Of course not, right? If he had, then he would be relevant and we'd be talking about Hunter Biden. Okay, now the one part that is true, as Anna pointed out, is Joe Biden's track record on civil rights is actually pretty terrible. And you remember that moment in the debates, and this almost cost Kamala Harris the vice presidency, when Kamala Harris called out his record on busing and said, I was the little girl who was bussed. And Biden didn't see it coming at all because he's used to being, as a corporate Democrat, as the chief corporate Democrat, he's used to being protected by other Democrats and by all of the corporate media. So when she called out his busing policy, he couldn't believe it. He was like, you remember in the debate, he was like, Joe, don't do that in the middle of the debate. You're giving away your hand, right? I say that kiddingly. I love that he did it, right? Because it was so obvious he didn't see it coming. Now, it's actually worse than that. And we told you during the primaries, after the primaries, look, he went to South Africa and pretended to fight with Nelson Mandela, pretend to get arrested. That's a pretty big lie about a very important matter, right? And I can go on, and I did go on. And when we did, corporate Democrats hated us. And they're like, oh, you're helping the right wing, you're helping Trump. No, we're in the middle of a primary, okay? And your guy's not the right candidate. We were right as usual, they were wrong as usual. Both in terms of policy, because Biden ain't no FDR 2.0. He's given up his presidency, he's doing nothing. He's letting Manchin and the Republicans and Mitch McConnell run the place. We were right about a policy. But on politics, he barely won by 43,000 votes in 3 states. He almost lost, the establishment Democrats almost lost to Trump again, right? So we were right on all those fronts. But that's long gone now. That's old history, okay? So the reason I tell you that though is because the right wing, there's one thing that they are frustrated by, which is not wrong, which is that the corporate media does cover for corporate Democrats. So talking about Joe Biden's civil rights history was verboten. Oftentimes when we talked about it, it was not other Democrats who yelled at us. It was so-called reporters who yelled at us, and news anchors and so-called journalists who were like, you're not allowed to talk about it. Dude, you're supposed to challenge people in power. I despise Donald Trump. I can tell you everything that's wrong with him, and I have. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't say things that are true about Joe Biden or any other Democrat. And by the way, you believe that too if you're a mainstream media reporter, because you said all the terrible things in the world about Bernie Sanders. You didn't mind hitting him. You don't mind hitting any progressive, right? You don't mind hitting the right. But when it comes to your beloved Joe Biden, no, that's a nope. I mean, we're now having CNN anchors ask Jen Psaki, what is the media getting wrong? How else can we serve you, right? So as you can tell from this, we are not defenders of the Bidens, and we are not defenders of the Democrats. But guys, keep it real. You really think the right wing is concerned about the use of the N-word? And that Hunter Biden is some sort of demigod that's secretly running the place, and that because he said the N-word, the right wing doesn't want him to run things anymore? None of that is true, and you know it.
All right, that's what we've got for you guys. Those are the stories.
Okay, those were the stories indeed.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of a cutesy kid story to lighten things up.
No.
And Anna just says no. Salt Dragon, it says no, vetoes cutesy kid stories. Now that's why she's called Salt Dragon.
Yeah. No, it's not that. It's just I'm struggling.
You're
I'm
done.
struggling
You're
today.
done.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
done. Okay. Hashtag done. Okay, guys, much love. I'm gonna see you tomorrow. Awesome Power Panel. And don't forget to watch Deep Dive with Jordan Uhl. That's coming up in 5 minutes. Twitch.tv/TYT. Love you. See you tomorrow.